Chapter 825. Although the power supply and communication had been restored, Lewis was still at home because it was the weekend after Friday. Barbara had already prepared breakfast and was greeting Dr. Frankie and Lewis to eat. She poured a glass of milk for both of them and asked, "Doctor, are you feeling better?" Dr. Frankie rubbed his waist, then smiled and said, "It's nothing, it's just a bump." Barbara patted her chest and said, "That's good to hear. I saw on the news that there was a gunfight at the memorial ceremony last night, and several people were unlucky enough to be shot. Although it was not life-threatening, it was still an unexpected disaster. Doctor, you're really lucky." She still remembered how Dr. Frankie had walked back last night with his hands on his waist. It was really a false alarm. What could have happened? Dr. Frankie opened the newspaper and said, "It was just a bump by a fugitive. You're the one who was too nervous." Barbara shook her head. Then she remembered something. "By the way, Doctor, I received a call from Mr. Orphy half an hour ago. He told me that he's on his way home. He said that he has something to discuss with you. He hopes that you can wait for him." Dr. Frankie frowned and looked down at Lewis, who was eating silently with his head down. He said with dissatisfaction, "What? He didn't come back last night?" Mr. Orphy said that there was something important. Dr. Frankie snorted and did not say anything else. Not long after, Mr. Orphy returned home. He asked Barbara to take Lewis to the yard outside to play, and then called Dr. Frankie to the study. Mr. Orphy did not say anything and just paced back and forth in the study impatiently. However, his eyes never left Dr. Frankie. It was like a parent looking at a child who made a mistake and was so angry that he could not say anything. "If you have something to say, just say it. I'm not your subordinate. You don't have to put on airs in front of me," Dr. Frankie said coldly. Mr. Orphy stopped and took a deep breath. He then stared at Dr. Frankie and said in a deep voice, "Let me ask you, did you and Billy have some kind of agreement before?" Dr. Frankie was slightly startled. He then tilted his head and said indifferently, "I don't know what you're talking about. Lighting Corporation, secret technical support." Mr. Orphy lowered his voice. Dr. Frankie opened his mouth but remained silent. He and Orphy looked at each other. After a long time, the doctor sighed and said, "Since you already know, why are you still asking me?" "Because I don't believe you. That's why I want to hear it from you personally." Mr. A.O. Fay said angrily, "I don't believe that my father would do such a thing. I don't believe that my father would become so irrational. Have you gone senile? Don't you know who's behind Leighton Corporation? You and Billy actually went to Leighton Corporation to trade this kind of technology privately?" Dr. Frankie shook his head and said, "I only know that if this deal is successful, we will have the ability to successfully launch our first satellite in 1 or 2 years. For this, any sacrifice is worth it." Mr. Orphy tried to calm himself down. "Do you know who our men have caught in the past 2 days? What does that have to do with me?" The professor shook his head. "I'm just a scientist. I don't care about politics. It's the FBI from the United States." Mr. Orphy stared at Dr. Frankie and said slowly, "Yes, you can ignore politics. But do you know that Leighton Corporation, the company you want to trade with, has long been targeted by the government there? Once the agreement is reached and the evidence is confirmed, Leighton Corporation will be accused of selling the country's technology, and we will be your accomplices. We will give that gangster-like country a very good excuse to blackmail us." This, Dr. Frankie stood up abruptly. Not being involved in politics did not mean that he could not analyze the pros and cons. He just never thought about it. This is impossible. Those agents are in my territory right now. Do you want me to send you to them?" Mr. Orphy roared at his old father. "You're my father. You're setting me up. Are you trying to get me killed? Are you trying to break this broken family into pieces again? Are you trying to destroy the life I've worked so hard to pick up again? You stubborn old man." "Orphy, Dr. Frankie's lips trembled. Mr. Orphy wiped his face with both hands and took a few deep breaths. "I'm sorry, I spoke too harshly. I'll put this matter aside for now. But during this time, no, from now on, don't have any contact with Billy. I don't want the current Mr. President to label me as an accomplice of Billy's people." Dr. Frankie was silent. Mr. Orphy turned around and said, I've already sent a letter of resignation to the Research Institute on your behalf. The reason is that you're not feeling well and can't do your current job. But you won't have nothing to do. The National University will hire you as an honorary dean. If you're too free, you can go teach the young people. You're interfering with my personal life. Orphe, you can't do this. Dr. Frankie rushed forward and grabbed his son's arm. I don't want to. I really don't want to. Mr. Orphe said slowly. I don't want Louis to see me send you to a nursing home. Orphe. Dr. Frankie let go of his hand weakly. He pushed open the door to the study and walked out in a daze. Barbara was playing football with Louis in the yard, but Louis didn't seem to be very happy. Barbara could only walk up to the child and squat down. Louis, don't you like playing football? Didn't you say your idol is Manadonna? Louis shook his head and looked up at the study. Barbara, our father and grandfather quarreling. How can that be? They just have something serious to talk about. Barbara comforted him. Maybe they'll come down soon. I might have to go prepare lunch. I'll make you something you like. Okay? Okay. Louis nodded and walked back into the house with Barbara's hand. He suddenly said, Barbara, is my mother a very powerful person? Barbara was startled. Why do you mention her? Louis said, yesterday, Grandfather took me to the Science and Technology Museum. I saw a huge satellite. It's so cool. And the creator has my mother's name on it. And Grandfather's name. Of course, because your mother is your grandfather's student. She's the disciple he's most proud of. Barbara smiled. Why didn't Father and Grandfather tell me about this? Louis was puzzled. Louis. Barbara squatted down and held the child's face. She said softly, Do you trust me? Louis nodded. Barbara said seriously, Then listen to me and trust me. Whether it's your father or your grandfather, they must have a very important reason for not telling you. Louis, are you a good boy? You should know not to make them sad, right? Louis nodded, though he did not fully understand. Colombia, Cartagena, a beautiful ancient bay city. It was already noon when the flight quietly landed in this city, known as the most beautiful bay city in South America. Oni, who was the first to exit the cabin, stretched his body and revealed a smile to the flight attendant in front of the door. Just as he was about to take a phone number, Luvia walked over, grabbed his ear, and pulled him away. Luaccio followed behind and looked at Songhauern. Is your friend always like this? Because they were in the first-class cabin, the four of them were the first to leave. The airport passageway was very empty and quiet at this time. It's probably the feeling of being enemies. Songhauern described it. He looked at Oni, who was tugging and pulling Luvia in front of him, and said with a smile, When I first met Oni, he was still working as a parking attendant in a hotel. Later, I found out that he would secretly drive the guest cars out and pretend to be rich. Did he secretly drive your car? Luaccio asked curiously. No. Songhauern shrugged and said, I don't drive luxury cars, so he didn't take a fancy to mine. Luaccio nodded. What about Luvia? How did she follow you? Songhauern smacked his lips and seemed to be lost in his memories. He suddenly said, Luvia actually means rain. I met her on a rainy day. At that time, she told me that she didn't have a name, so I gave her the name Luvia. That's it. That's it? Luaccio was slightly stunned. Songhauern shrugged and smiled. That's it. Boss Luo smiled and skipped the topic. What's the next itinerary? Songhauern walked in front and said, We don't need to go anywhere. This is our temporary destination. Dad has already arrived. I will take you to see him now. Songhauern, who was standing in front of the passageway, suddenly turned around and smiled. Oh, I forgot to tell you. You can do whatever you want here, because this is our Song family's territory. He looked at Luaccio and said softly, Us. Yin 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 PS1. Update for the owner of Rippling Heart, 1/2. Chapter 826. My Humble House. It was a Chinese-style courtyard house that was really named My Humble Abode. However, a high wall was built outside the courtyard house, enclosing it inside. Otherwise, if this humble house was completely exposed, it would seem out of place with the architectural style of this ancient city. This beautiful ancient city by the harbor, Cartagena. In my humble house, not only was the exterior made in accordance with the courtyard house of the old capital, but even the furnishings inside were also antique. At this moment, a red sports car stopped in front of the tall wall outside my humble house. After the door was knocked open, it slowly drove into my humble house. A slender girl, about 22 or 23 years old, wearing a black short jacket and dyed purple hair, walked out of the sports car. The entrance of my humble house is named Dragon Hall. At this moment, a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s slowly walked out of Dragon Hall. He was followed by two women in their 30s wearing servant uniforms. "Welcome back, Miss Ng." "Fifth uncle, where's Grandpa?" The girl called Miss Ng handed the car key to one of the maids behind fifth uncle and walked directly into Dragon Hall. "Master is in the kitchen now," fifth uncle replied. Miss Ng suddenly stopped and said in shock, "Didn't he just come out of the village? Why didn't he take a rest? Why did he run to the kitchen when he arrived at my humble house?" Fifth uncle smiled and said, "It's like this. Master made the best quality dried abalone when he was in the village and brought it all the way out. Now, he's preparing to stew the other ingredients. He's going to make a pot of Buddha jumps over the wall. It's a treat." "A treat?" Miss Ng was stunned. "Who's so influential? Grandpa hasn't cooked for a long time. This time, he's making a super troublesome dish like Buddha jumps over the wall. Is it the Fire King or the President? I heard it's a young man." Fifth uncle also showed a puzzled expression. "It seems that eldest young master brought him back personally. He just got off the plane and will arrive at my humble house in about an hour's drive." "Uncle is back." Miss Ng blinked. "Didn't he go to Brazil? Has he finished his work? It should be no problem." Fifth uncle smiled and said, "Eldest young master did it himself. What else can happen? Miss Ng, shall I get someone to prepare hot water for you?" Miss Ng shook her head. Then she put her hand behind her waist, pulled out a palm-sized pistol, and handed it to fifth uncle. "I don't need it now. I'll go to the kitchen to see Grandpa. I haven't seen him in months." When Miss Ng came to the kitchen, she found several servants standing outside. She came to the door and asked curiously, "Why are you all standing here?" A servant hurriedly said, "Miss Ng, it was Master who ordered us not to go in. He only left fourth uncle inside, saying that he would do his best to do it himself." Fourth uncle is the head chef of my humble abode. He is fifth uncle's blood brother and has been serving the Song family for several decades. At that moment, Miss Ng was even more surprised. She had never seen her grandfather value a guest so much. Not only did he prepare the most troublesome dishes, but he also only asked seventh uncle to help. Miss Ng frowned and stepped into the kitchen. "Ah, see, is the sea cucumber ready?" "It's ready, master." "Okay, put it here. I'll cut it later." In front of the counter, Song Tianyu, whose hair was white, was wearing an apron. He was cutting dry bamboo shoots horizontally. He looked so focused that he didn't seem to notice that someone had quietly walked in. Miss Ng gestured for fourth uncle to be silent. She had someone take the prepared sea cucumber from him and walked behind Song Tianyu. Song Tianyu saw a pair of white hands quietly put down the utensils. Then he withdrew his hands and continued cutting the dry bamboo shoots on the chopping board. Miss Ng blinked. Grandpa was completely planning to play with her. He had clearly noticed it, all right? She stealthily reached out her hand and touched the prepared quail egg beside Song Tianyu. But before she touched it, Song Tianyu quickly waved his hand and knocked the back of Miss Ying's hand with the back of the kitchen knife. "Grandpa, you want to chop me up?" Miss Ying said in pain. "Who told you to eat it?" Song Tianyu turned around and gently knocked on Miss Ying's forehead. "Naughty girl, when did you come back?" "Just now." Miss Ying quickly picked up a quail egg and put it into her mouth. "It's almost the new year, so I was busy settling the accounts and collecting some debts. I heard that you were here, so I hurried back. Did things go well?" Song Tianyu put down the kitchen knife and started wiping his hands. At the same time, he walked to the stove. It was the kind of stove that was commonly seen in the old villages. It burned firewood and had a strong fire. A steamer was placed on the big pot. Steam spewed out, and a fragrant smell spread. "Don't worry, Grandpa. Everyone's business is doing well this year. No one is on credit." Miss Ng smiled and said, "A few bosses even paid off last year's debts. They also said that they were very grateful to you and that they would like to meet you." "There's no need to meet them. Tell them not to send me anything. Song Tianyu lit the fire. We're all descendants of the Yellow Emperor. It's not easy for us to live in a foreign country. If we can help, we'll help. Okay, but if everyone is like this, won't we become dependent on each other? Missing shook her head. Our ancestors said that we don't expect to be repaid for our kindness. Song Tianyu stood up. Besides, we're in a foreign country. If we don't help each other, no one will help us. Okay, I understand, but I can't do it for now. Missing shrugged. Song Tianyu said in amusement. Then what can you do? Miss Ying's eyes turned. She suddenly hugged Song Tianyu's arm and said coquettishly, Of course, I can eat the Buddha jumps over the wall soup you made. Song Tianyu patted Miss Ying's forehead and said in amusement, This Buddha jumps over the wall soup isn't for you. You've already eaten it. Miss Ying pouted and said, The one you ate when you were 10? How many years ago? Grandpa. The Buddha jumps over the wall soup made by the elders is enough for the Song family. Song Tianyu suddenly said softly, When your uncle was 10, I personally made a meal for him. When you were 10, I also personally made a meal for you. Now it should be his turn. Him? You'll know when you see him. Song Tianyu smiled and said, Okay, don't just stand there. Since you're here, help me pick those vegetables. No need. I'm going to take a shower. Niece. The car slowly drove through the streets that retained many ancient buildings. While Luochio was sizing them up with interest, Song Howren explained some things. The car was specially bulletproof, and the front and back seats were separated. The conversation in the back seat wouldn't be heard by the people in the front seat, so the privacy was quite good. She's my sister's orphan. Song Howren sighed and said, My father married my mother when he was middle-aged and gave birth to me. Before that, he had a wife. However, my sister and brother-in-law passed away in an accident 15 years ago. Song Ying was only 8 years old at that time. Oh, right, my brother-in-law married into our family. So, Song Ying took our surname. Do you want to meet her? Luochio nodded. Of course. Song Howren said matter-of-factly, Including you, there are only 3 young people in our family. Sooner or later, you'll get to know her. Moreover, after Song Ying graduated, she began to take care of our business in Cartagena. She's doing well, but sometimes she's not steady enough. You're almost the same age, so you're in the same generation. Get to know each other. Boss Luo declined to comment. Is there a Chinatown here? As the car drove through a street, Luochio suddenly asked. Dad helped build it. Song Howren smiled and said, Dad is also the honorary president of the Chinese Chamber of Commerce here. He said that he couldn't bear to see our people being bullied by foreigners when doing business outside, so he helped build this street. It's not called Chinatown, but China Street. Can I get off? Luochio suddenly asked. That's not a problem. Song Howren shrugged and did not ask why. He simply asked Oni to stop the car at the entrance of China Street. Wait here. I'll accompany Luochio in. Okay. Oni nodded and watched the two of them walk into Zhonghua Street. At this time, Luvia had a frown on her face. Looking at her, Oni asked curiously, What is it? Luvia said, Don't you feel that this street seems a bit deserted? Oni was taken aback and raised his head to look. Speaking of which, I remember there's a shop selling Chinese snacks here. The taste is quite good, but it doesn't seem to be open today. Luvia looked over and saw that the door of the shop that Oni mentioned was closed. Some rubbish was piled up in front of the door. It seemed that the shop had not opened for business for some time. There are quite a lot of people here. Relatively speaking, it was a place with more Chinese people. Of course, there might be some Oriental faces, but they came from several other Asian countries. However, for Luochio, it gave him a feeling of returning to China. At least many of the signs were written in Chinese. Today is Saturday. There are relatively many people here. Song Howren looked around. I haven't been to this street for a long time. I feel that there are not as many people as before. It's probably because physical businesses are not easy to do now. Luochio replied casually. Why? Do you want to buy something, or just want to walk around? Song Howren suddenly asked. Luochio looked at Song Howren. I plan to buy some fruits. Buy fruits? Luochio nodded and said, Is it strange? If you're visiting your elders, you should buy something, right? Does an old master Song like to eat fruits? Ha ha. Song Howren suddenly laughed. Buy fruits, buy fruits. It's not strange at all. Fruits are good. Dad likes to eat them, especially persimmons. Come, I remember there's a fruit shop in front. The fruits they sell are the best in the whole street. Let me take you there. With Song Howren leading the way, the two quickly came to a fruit shop in the middle of the street. A young man in his 20s was playing with his mobile phone in front of the shop. Is the boss here? Song Howren greeted the young man. The young man seemed to be indifferent. Song Howren did not mind and shouted again, Is boss you here? Who are you? The young man finally reacted. He looked up and said, Our boss is not here. Why are you looking for him? Nothing, old friend. I just want to chat with him. Song Howren shrugged. Since he is not here, then forget it. We'll just buy something. Do you sell persimmons here? No, we have all the ones here. Take a look yourself. The young man looked down at his mobile phone again, looking absent-minded. Song Howren looked around the shop and then glanced at Luaccio. He picked up an apple and said, But I want to buy persimmons. Then there is no choice. Persimmons are not easy to preserve, and very few people buy them. We have not restocked in a long time. The young man pointed ahead and said, There is a new supermarket in front. They have everything. You can go there if you want to buy. But if you don't want to go there, you could take a look around. If you see anything you like, it will be half price. Half price? That good? Song Howren was stunned. We are selling at a loss. This place is about to close, so we are clearing the place, the young man said helplessly. Song Howren nodded and said, Close? Why? I remember that Bossy has been running this fruit shop for more than 10 years. Business has always been good. Is he planning to enjoy his life after making money? Enjoy his life? In his next life? The young man shook his head and said, He can't even afford to pay me this month's salary. He is still helping to wash the dishes in the restaurant in front. That's not right. What happened? Song Howren asked curiously. Is Bossy's business that bad? Also, I remember that the shop next door was Bossy's, right? Why is it a ready-made clothing store now? The young man sighed and said, Last year? You don't know. Since the first half of this year, the rent on this street has increased by several times. Then, a new supermarket opened. It has everything and is cheaper than ours. All the customers have been snatched away. The boss can't afford the rent, so he can only shrink the shop. But after half a year, business is getting worse and worse. Now, he is losing money. That's impossible. Song Howren frowned and said, I remember that the Zhonghua Street Chamber of Commerce has a rule. The rent here will only increase once every 5 years. Also, it is based on the lowest standard. The increase cannot exceed 5% each time. It has been changed a long time ago. As the young man said that, he looked around and lowered his voice. The Chamber of Commerce has changed a leader. Everything has been changed. Let me tell you, the boss behind the new supermarket is still supported by this leader. His goal is to force us out. Force you out? What's the point of that? You don't understand, right? The young man shrugged and said, I heard that this place is planning to cooperate with the government to plan a new project. So, they want to force us out. If we don't leave, then they will increase the rent and open a supermarket to steal our business. If we can't hold on, then we can only resign ourselves to fate and accept it. In the past few months, many shops have closed. In 2 days, we will close here as well. Song Howren nodded. The things here are not bad. I will come back later. After saying that, Song Howren patted Luaccio's shoulder and walked away from the fruit stall. Luaccio did not see any unhappy expression on Song Howren's face. Instead, his smiling face gave off a dangerous feeling. He suddenly looked at Luaccio and said, Guess where I want to go now? The Chamber of Commerce. Luaccio thought for a moment and said. Song Howren smiled and said, Why don't we take a look at the supermarket? Isn't the Chamber of Commerce closer to the answer? Luaccio asked back. Chapter 8:27. 1. Luaccio followed Song Howren's footsteps. Not long after, they arrived in front of a commercial building. This building was not very high, only 6 floors. On the door, there was a sign that said XX Allied Chamber of Commerce. Song Howren did not immediately go up. Instead, he wandered around in front of the Chamber of Commerce building. Is the new leader of the Chamber of Commerce your niece? Luochio suddenly asked. Song Howard shook his head. It's not Song Ying. It's her uncle, that is my brother-in-law's younger brother. Do you have this kind of feeling? Luochio just smiled and did not speak. Song Howard said, speaking of which, you're really amazing. I don't know why. Every time I'm with you, I always feel like I have no worries. No matter what I want to say, I don't have to restrain myself. It's really quite relaxing. Luochio looked up at the floor of the commercial building. Maybe it's because I don't give advice to others. If I don't give advice, I won't be able to influence other people's thoughts. However, Song Howard didn't think so, because he understood that this was because this blood relative who had been stranded outside had a special quality that could make people feel at ease. In a noisy Zhonghua street, just because he was standing next to Luochio, he felt like he was in an open field. You won't particularly notice his existence, but you won't ignore his existence either. After thinking about it, Song Howard could only think of a word to describe this nephew of his. Just right. Are we going in now? Luochio looked at the door of the Chamber of Commerce. Through the glass door, one could see that the clerk sitting at the reception of the Chamber of Commerce had been curiously looking at them, standing outside the door. No, let's go back to the back door. Song Howard shook his head and led Luochio to the back alley of the commercial building. What made Luochio curious was that Song Howard did not go directly to the back door. Instead, he stopped about 5 or 6 meters away. There was also a kick door here. It was a very ordinary iron door. Song Howard reached out and knocked on the iron door. It was a strange knocking method with a strange pattern, and he only knocked once. After knocking on the door, he stood still and looked at his watch. He continued, "This door is called the life door. Do you know why?" Luochio shook his head. Song Howard said indifferently, "This building was originally built according to the orientation of the 8 diagrams. Father deliberately left this door behind and named it the Gate of Life." The Gate of Life, the Gate of Life. Luochio reached out and touched the iron door and said slowly, "Life represents life. Life represents hope. So the Gate of Life is the gate of hope, a gate that gives people hope." Song Howard's lips moved slightly, then looked up and down at Luochio and nodded. "I didn't expect you to be able to understand Father's original intention at the first time. Yes, the Gate of Life is the meaning of hope. Father left this door behind to give a way out to those who are really in trouble on Zhonghua Street." Song Howard paused for a moment before continuing. "Father always says that a kind person should not bully the heavens. Although we're doing some blood-stained business, when it is time to be righteous, we will be righteous." "Good fortune." Luochio nodded and smiled. "Old Master Song is planting good fortune." Song Howard was stunned. "How do you know Father is a Buddhist?" Luochio smiled and said, "There is a statue of Buddha in front of the door. Since Old Master Song is the founder of this place, I think it has something to do with it." "You have good observation skills." Song Howard looked at Luochio with more and more admiration. Luochio said at this time, "Since this is a gate that needs to be opened to give people hope, why are you knocking on the door now?" Song Howard sneered. "If I don't knock now, I'm afraid it will never open in the future. I'm here." The door shaft made a squeaking sound. Song Howard put down his watch, and the iron door in front of him suddenly opened. A middle-aged man in his 40s with a pair of gold-rimmed glasses appeared in front of the two, slightly out of breath. He looked a little nervous, but he hid it by wiping his face with a handkerchief. "Young Master Howard, why are you here? Why didn't you inform me beforehand and ask me to pick you up?" 3 minutes and 18 seconds. Song Howard smiled. The middle-aged man was stunned. "What 3 minutes and 18 seconds?" Song Howard said, "From the moment I knocked on the door, 3 minutes and 18 seconds passed before the door opened. And the person who opened the door is you, the person in charge of the Chamber of Commerce. Tell me, should I be happy or disappointed?" "Young Master Howard, there's a reason for this. I can explain." The middle-aged man quickly said. "Okay, explain it to me immediately." Song Howard nodded. The middle-aged man subconsciously said, Why don't we go inside and talk? It's not convenient here." "I think it's quite convenient here. The wind is cold, the water is cold, and there are few people. It's quiet enough." Song Haoran smiled and even made an inviting gesture. President Bai Shuetang, please speak. President Bai Shuetang quickly said, it's like this. The people from the Chamber of Commerce noticed your arrival, but you seemed to have something on and didn't come in. They reported it to me, so I hurried down to pick you up. But at this time, didn't you leave? Then the door of life was knocked on. I thought it might be you who knocked on it, so I ran over to open the door for you. That's why I wasted so much time. Oh, so you're saying that you're blaming me for not informing you beforehand? Song Haoran smiled. I wouldn't dare. I was too slow. President Bai Shuetang repeatedly lowered his head and said, I was too slow. I should train more. Song Haoran smiled in relief and suddenly patted President Bai Shuetang's stomach. Yes, you should train more. After saying that, he walked past Bai Shuetang and walked in. His destination was the office of the Chamber of Commerce's president. Song Haoran directly sat on President Bai Shuetang's seat without saying anything. The current president of the Chamber of Commerce could only stand in front of the office desk uneasily. Bai Shuetang knew very well who Zhonghua Street belonged to. If his father was described as the emperor, then the one in front of him was naturally the crown prince, and Bai Shuetang was at most a relative. Young master, this is? President Bai Shuetang glanced at Luochio, who was sitting on the sofa next to him at this time. Song Haoran waved his hand and said, Don't worry about him. I didn't come here today for any special reason. I just happened to pass by on my way back today, so I came here on a whim. Of course. President Bai Shuetang quickly said, It's our honor for young master to come and see this place. How is Zhonghua Street recently? Song Haoran picked up the document on the desk and glanced at it. President Bai Shuetang looked natural and said, Not bad. Recently, we've invited investors to build a new supermarket. The business is very good. Supermarket? Song Haoran curiously asked. If you build a supermarket here, won't it affect the business of other merchants? Of course not. President Bai Shuetang said, There are many shops in this supermarket. We plan to centralize all the retail businesses outside. This way, not only will it be convenient to manage, but it can also increase the efficiency. Young master, although Zhonghua Street was very prosperous in the past, the various retail shops were too scattered. Whether it was tourists or locals, it was often inconvenient to buy things. But if you can centralize them... Oh, here is a supermarket performance report for the past 2 months. You could take a look. President Bai Shuetang took out a few documents and reports. You're quite well prepared, aren't you? Song Haoran smiled and looked at it seriously. President Bai Shuetang said, In fact, it's a coincidence. Missing just came to see the account book today. These are actually prepared for her. I didn't expect to let you see it again. Oh, has Song seen it? Song Haoran nodded, then threw the documents aside. Since she has seen it, then I won't look at it. In fact, Missing also said that there's no problem. President Bai Shuetang quickly said. Song Haoran suddenly stood up. In fact, there is nothing else. I am in a hurry. You don't have to send me off. I can go by myself. Okay. President Bai Shuetang quickly opened the office door for Song Haoran. Before going out, Song Haoran suddenly stopped and said, By the way, the axle of the life door is a little rusty. Ask someone to put some oil or something. Otherwise, think about it. Those who come and knock on the life door will hear a squeaking sound every time they open the door. That will be a little scary. I know. I will ask the master to repair it immediately. After watching Song Haoran and Luochio walk into the elevator, Bai Shuetang hurriedly closed the office door and then made a phone call, asked someone to put some oil on the axle of the life door. As soon as the call ended, President Bai Shuetang frowned. Then, he quickly pulled open a drawer of his desk. There was also a cell phone inside. He picked it up and thought for a while. Then, he made another call. There is something. Song Haoran suddenly came. The clerk at the front desk was very curious about the 2 people who came out of the president's office. Song Haoran was the romantic and elegant type. He always had a charming and beautiful smile on his face. The clerk could not help but take a few more glances at him. As for the person next to him, he was much more ordinary. He would always inadvertently overlook it, but he would never be able to ignore it. It was like a unique piece of art placed in the room. Song Howard sincerely put incense in front of the Buddha statue in the lobby of the Chamber of Commerce. Then he lit a few more sticks and sent them to Luochio. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter if you worship it. It is for peace of mind. A breeze suddenly blew in the lobby, and the curling incense in front of the Buddha statue was suddenly messed up. Luochio held the incense and asked, "This Buddha statue has been blessed by someone?" "Yes, it is a master in Thailand. My father spent a lot of money to do it." Song Howard nodded. "How do you know?" Luochio said, "Some Buddha statues that have been blessed will have more things. There's an extra magic instrument here. You know quite a lot." Song Howard did not care. Luochio said indifferently, "Because there's a very knowledgeable person by my side recently. She taught me a lot of things." "Good." Song Howard nodded. Luochio extinguished the incense in his hand and put it back. He said indifferently, "Since it has been blessed, I will not light the incense. The Buddha statue has a spirit. It is better to leave it for those who need it. Is there a need to pay attention to this?" Song Howard was stunned. Then he laughed and said, "Strange man, all right, we should go back. My father must be waiting anxiously. If we don't go back now, he will go crazy. Let me tell you, when my father goes crazy, it is very scary." Luochio nodded. "When we go back, let's buy some apples." Oni and Luvia were still waiting at the car at the corner of the street. When they saw Song Howard and Luochio coming over with a bag of apples, Luvia quickly opened the back seat of the car. Song Howard let Luochio sit in first, and then he walked to the other side. At this time, he whispered in Luvia's ear, "Investigate Baishitang." Luvia nodded and followed him into the car as if nothing had happened. When the restaurant opened in the morning, Caroline took advantage of the fact that they were busy and slipped away quietly. As for the expressions of the restaurant staff when they found out that something had been stolen from the kitchen, Caroline did not intend to think about it. A night's rest had restored her a lot of spirit, but she suddenly did not know where she should go. She did not dare to go back to her house. Maybe the police and Boss Boston's people would be waiting for her there. As for the hospital, she did not dare to go there. Big cousin and second cousin knew about the matter between her and Lawyer Carlo. Going to the hospital would be like walking into a trap. Her wallet and ID were not with her at this time. She did not even have a coin on her. Originally, she planned to smash the cash register of the restaurant where she was hiding to get some cash, but the cash register obviously had an alarm system. She could not leave the restaurant, so she could only wait for the police to come and take her away. However, being born in the slums, Caroline still had some skills to make a living, except for selling her body. The target was right in front of her, an office worker who was walking while reading the newspaper. It was a worthy target. Caroline's target was the other party's wallet, but she wasn't a professional. She only knew a female thief who taught her a little stealing skills, and Caroline herself hadn't put in any effort or practice in this area. Stealing was not as fast as lying in bed to make money, especially when she was still young and men liked her body. Caroline deliberately bumped into the office worker who was reading the newspaper with his head down. She planned to quietly take advantage of the distraction of the other party's attention to pull out the wallet from his bag. But at this moment, she suddenly felt dizzy. She missed the best opportunity because of this. She fell to the ground. The office worker saw it and reached out to help Caroline up. However, Caroline seemed to have lost her soul at this time, sitting on the ground in a daze. She looked ahead in a daze. A woman was pushing a stroller across the road. It was a green light, and the woman was on the phone. However, at this time, a red car seemed to be unable to stop. Perhaps for some other reason, it directly hit the woman. The woman's body was knocked far away on the road, and the stroller was completely crushed into a pile of junk by the wheels. Bloodstains. Miss, are you okay?" It was a call. Caroline was startled, and her whole body trembled. She stood up at once, looked at the sidewalk in front of her, and blurted out, "Help." Only then did she realize that it was a red light in front of her. There was no woman pushing a stroller at all. Caroline rubbed her forehead. I'm fine, thank you." The office worker looked at her suspiciously and said, "Okay then, be careful." It seemed that he was in a hurry to go to work. Caroline watched the other party walk away and felt a burst of annoyance. She still failed to take out the wallet from the other party's bag and missed a good opportunity. Caroline shook her head, sighed, and planned to find a new target. Suddenly, someone bumped into her gently. "Oh, I'm sorry." It was a woman who was on the phone and pushing a stroller past her. After accidentally bumping into Caroline, the woman quickly apologized and began to talk on the phone again while pushing the stroller past. "Oh, it's nothing. I just accidentally bumped into someone. Were we just now? Hairstyling? Let me think, do you know a new store? I'm interested. Far away. At the intersection ahead." Chapter 828. 1. The green light was counting down, and it would disappear in a few seconds. The driver was probably in a hurry. He estimated that if he didn't speed up, he should be able to pass before the switch. Then he wouldn't have to stop and start again. 6 seconds, 5 seconds. Very good, just enough time. The driver was in a good mood. 3 seconds later, the driver's eyes suddenly widened, and then his foot slammed on the brakes. A woman came out with a stroller. She couldn't have passed. There were only 2 or 3 seconds left. Was this woman an idiot? She was still on the phone. Such a careless mother. Because of the speed, the car couldn't stop. The driver's eyes widened in despair. However, when he rushed across the sidewalk, he didn't seem to feel that he had hit something. The car finally stopped at the crossroad. The driver quickly got out of the car and looked back. What she saw was the careless mother who was on the phone being held by a young girl who had saved her. "How can you walk?" The driver roared and walked up. He felt that he had to scold a few times to calm down. "I'm so grateful to you. God, I'm so grateful to you. My God." The woman thanked Caroline excitedly in front of her. She held the child in the stroller and kept kissing the child's forehead. "Oh, I'm sorry, baby. Mom won't call when crossing the road in the future. Can you forgive me?" "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Caroline looked at her quietly. Why did she reach out to pull the woman? She was still thinking about this question. Why did she see this scene in advance? At the same time, she began to be frightened by this question. She had realized something. Something special seemed to have happened to her. "Miss, please be sure to tell me your name and contact information." The woman was very grateful. "Please let me repay you well. Otherwise, I don't know how to forgive my carelessness." Caroline opened her mouth, then thought for a while and said, "Then, can you treat me to breakfast? To be honest, I haven't had breakfast today." Of course, I'd love to." She grabbed Caroline's hand and quickly said, "Whatever you want to eat, it's no problem." The feeling of being thanked. So this is it. People like me also have times like this to be appreciated. Caroline laughed at herself. This smile looked a little strange to the child's mother. She couldn't help but look at Caroline in confusion. Only then did the child's mother realize that there was a very clear bruise on Caroline's neck, as if someone had strangled her. A circle of blood appeared in Caroline's eyes, as if she was wearing special contact lenses. "Are you okay?" the child's mother asked subconsciously. Caroline shook her head. Maybe she could think of a reason to deal with it. For example, she was abused by her boyfriend, then escaped, and now she was penniless. Perhaps the child's mother would be more willing to help her a little. If she could get some cash, she could even leave this place temporarily through some pheasant cars. Caroline moved her lips and was about to come up with an excuse, but she suddenly swallowed her words and changed her mind. "Sorry, I can't eat breakfast. I have something urgent to attend to." As she spoke, she ignored the child's mother's call and hurriedly ran into the crowd. During the rush hour, the streets were bustling, and Caroline soon disappeared from the mother's sight. The reason why Caroline hurried away was that she saw Arnaud. It seemed that Arnaud passed by in a hurry. The man looked a little evasive and stopped in front of a mobile breakfast car. "Give me a cup of coffee." The salesperson in the car took a look. The man who bought the coffee had obvious bruises on his face. He must have been in a fight or something like that. There were also wounds on his cheeks. He probably scraped his skin during the fight or something like that. The salesman didn't care. There were too many people who got injured in fights in this place. "Sir, your coffee." "Thank you, for 2 reals." He took out a pile of scattered coins from his pocket, picked out 2, and put them directly on the counter. He then took the coffee and left. But he suddenly felt someone patting his shoulder. He turned around in confusion, and his eyes suddenly shrank. "Arnaud, You're okay. It's really you. That's great. Caroline grabbed the man's arm. Perhaps because she was happy, she grabbed it very hard. Caroline looked at the scars on the man's face at this time. How did you escape from Boston? Did they do anything to you later? She looked at the scars on Arnaud's face. She didn't know how many times he had been beaten after she left. She felt somewhat apologetic. The man, Arnold, stared blankly for a moment, then quickly said, I took advantage of the time when they were asleep to sneak out. What about you? Are you okay? Caroline shook her head. After they took me out, I found a chance to escape, but I think they won't let me go so easily. Arnaud nodded and said, Yes, Boston is ruthless. He won't let you go so easily. Have you thought about what to do next? Caroline said worriedly, I don't know. Maybe I want to leave here. I'm still thinking of a way. What about you? You finally escaped. What are you going to do now? Arnaud shook his head and said, I haven't thought about it yet, but I should be able to find a place to hide temporarily. Why don't you come with me? Caroline frowned and asked subconsciously, Where? University. We can go to the university to hide. Arnaud quickly said, The university's dormitory. I can temporarily stay with my classmates for a few days. University? Caroline hesitated. Arnaud quickly said, There are many people there, and there are also university guards. Even if it's Boston, he won't dare to mess around. Caroline thought about it and nodded in agreement. That's fine. Passing through rows of luxurious villas, Songhauern introduced the background of the people living here to Luaccio. Basically, they are all descendants of Spanish nobles. Since the middle of the 16th century, this place has been colonized by Spain. This situation lasted for a long time. In fact, Cartagena had once declined. It was not until the decade or two of the last century that it prospered again because of shipping. Luaccio listened quietly. My humble abode? The car finally stopped in front of a building surrounded by tall walls. Luaccio looked at the plaque hanging in front of the door. Songhauern smiled and said, This was written by Dad. Do you know why it's called My Humble Abode? Luaccio shook his head. Songhauern said, In the beginning, this was where we lived. In recent years, Dad moved to another place. Firstly, the environment there is better and more suitable for living. Secondly, it can avoid some unnecessary disturbances. I have lived in this humble abode for about 10 years. Father said that in the beginning, our Song family actually had nothing. The old ancestor was just an honest farmer. He only had a tile-roofed house and 4 bare walls. When winter came, the cold wind couldn't even block it. Have you been there? Songhauern shook his head and said, I've returned to the country a few times. There was one time when I followed my father to his hometown, but it's completely changed. All I could find was a piece of barren land. That's why this humble abode is here. Luaccio nodded. That's why this humble abode is here. Songhauern smiled and led Luaccio inside. When they passed by the entrance named Dragon Hall, Oni and Luvia had already stopped. The two of them did not go deeper, but a servant came out to greet them. From the looks of it, they were all familiar faces. Luaccio met the housekeeper of this humble abode called Fifth Uncle. This middle-aged man had some gray hair. His expression and movements were very strict. His meticulous attitude seemed to faintly carry a hint of British style. Fifth Uncle asked Luaccio. After glancing at Luaccio's face, his expression was somewhat moved, but he did not say anything. He only became more respectful. Songhauern said that Fifth Uncle had studied in a school that specialized in training housekeepers. Fifth Uncle, this Mr. Luo is an honored guest of this humble abode. Please greet him first. Songhauern looked at Luaccio and said, Wait for me. Someone will greet you. If you need anything, just tell Fifth Uncle. Luaccio did not ask why Songhauern left. Inside this humble abode was completely built according to the alleys of the old capital. At this time, the side hall where Luaccio was also antique. Fifth Uncle stood in front of Luaccio very respectfully. Even if he was standing, he was at the right position. Honored guest, what would you like to drink? Give me a glass of water. Luaccio responded politely. Honored guest, please wait a moment. Fifth Uncle nodded without any dissatisfaction. Without any superfluous words, he turned around and walked out. The side hall became quiet all of a sudden, because Luo Qiu was the only one here. He casually picked up a book on the shelf next to him and read it. It was History of the Ming Dynasty in the 24 Histories. Footsteps. Honored guest. How can you only serve him with water? It was a woman's voice. Luo Qiu closed the book and turned around. He saw a woman in a Chong Sam with pink-dyed hair and hair tied up in a bun. She walked in slowly with a tea tray in her hands, with dimples on her face. The woman in Chong Sam put down the tea tray and chuckled. Jun Shan's silver needle, also known as golden laid jade. According to legend, its first seed was planted by a Huang and envying. It has been passed down since ancient times. The woman in Chong Sam began to take out the stove to boil water and wash the tea. Her movements were gentle, like a girl picking tea in the south of the Yangtze River. She opened her mouth slightly. One day, when the second emperor of the Tang dynasty came to court, the courtier held a cup of tea for him. When the hot water was poured into the cup, a cloud of white mist rose into the air. Suddenly, a white crane flew out of the white mist. The white crane nodded 3 times to Emperor Mingzong and flew toward the blue sky. The emperor asked why, and his courtiers answered, it's because the water from Liuyi Well in Junshan was used to soak Huang Lingmao. And Huang Lingmao is what we often call Junshan silver needle. Since then, Junshan silver needle has become a special tribute tea for the emperor. She used a teacup with a fragrance. The woman in Chong Sam offered the teacup with both hands and said softly, smell the fragrance. Luo Qiu took the teacup from the woman in Chong Sam, opened it, and took a look. Then he shook his head and said, actually, I don't know much about it. The boss was telling the truth. Miss Maid had never brewed kung fu tea before. Boss Luo felt that the black tea and flower tea made by Miss Maid were excellent enough, so he didn't have any requirements in this regard. The woman in Chong Sam was startled when she heard this. Boss Luo drank a mouthful and said, it tastes good. Where can I buy it? I'm afraid it's a little difficult. This tea was auctioned at the highest price at the tea ceremony in the tea village of Huan Nation 5 years ago. You can't buy it outside. The woman in Chong Sam smiled. Because you're a distinguished guest, I'll take it out to serve you. Thank you. Luo Qiu nodded. The woman in Chong Sam suddenly said, when we serve our guests, we use the service comparable to the best hotels. But in all these years, there have only been a total of 6 people, including you, who have been addressed as honored guests in my humble abode. Do you know who the first 5 distinguished guests are? Of course, they're friends of the owner of this place. Boss Luo thought for a while. There's a president of this country, a prominent tycoon in the Chinese circle, and a fierce and ambitious person who monopolizes the arms business of a continent. They're all people who can cause an uproar in the outside world with a stomp of their feet. Then, as the 6th distinguished guest, who are you? Boss Luo said directly, I recently took over a small shop. I usually sell things that others need. The woman in Chong Sam raised her face slightly. What do you mean by that? Boss Luo said, it means that I sell a little bit of everything. Do you have a business card? She continued to ask. Boss Luo shook his head and said apologetically, I don't have a business card, but I do have a voucher for guests, but I don't plan to give it to you yet. Miss, you seem to be in good condition and you don't lack anything. So I'm sorry. Is that so? That's a pity. The woman in Chong Sam smiled and said indifferently, then, please take a seat, distinguished guest. I'll go out. Just like that, she flew away. Boss Luo smiled and sat down. Then, he held the teacup in his hand and looked at it. After that, he looked at the Junshan silver needles that hadn't been used up. He wiped the utensil with his hand, and a container full of tea leaves appeared on the saucer. Well, it should last for a long time. Boss Luo smiled and snapped his fingers. The container full of tea leaves disappeared. Only a glass container appeared on the open club cabinet on the stairs. Has someone been here? At this time, Uncle Wu came in with a cup of water and a plate. He looked at the set of tableware beside Luo Qiu and frowned. He recognized the things in the tableware and had some guesses about the visitor. Nothing. Luo Qiu smiled and said, just a lady wants to talk to me. I'm really sorry, distinguished guest. Uncle Wu hurriedly said, it's my fault. That lady didn't say or do anything to you, right? No. Boss Luo shook his head and said, "If you have time, help me thank her for the tea and tell me some stories." Of course, of course. Uncle Wu nodded. He didn't know why he was nervous. He felt that this young man was more nervous than old Master Song when he was angry. It was like the sea, a boundless sea that hid the undercurrents and whirlpools in the uninhabited land. Hopefully, Missing didn't have any conflicts with this distinguished guest. Dad's Buddha jumps over the wall. Song Howren personally sent a distinguished guest, and this young man's physiognomy. Uncle Wu had some guesses in his heart. Yin yin yin. Chapter 829. 1. Song Tianyu took off his apron when all the processes were done. He instructed fourth uncle in the kitchen, washed his hands, and walked out of the kitchen. Outside the kitchen was an independent courtyard with a small vegetable field. When Song Tianyu came out, he found that Song Howren had come back at some point. He had fetched a bucket of water and was watering the plants in the vegetable field. Song Tianyu smiled and quietly walked behind Song Howren with his hands behind his back. He's back. Yes, he just got back. Song Howren squatted down and reached out to pluck the spoiled leaves. He said, "Our family's vegetable field doesn't use any herbs. The vegetables produced are natural and healthy. However, there's one thing that's not good about it, and that's that it's easy to get these kinds of worms." Song Tianyu glanced at him and said indifferently, "You seem to have something to say to me?" Song Howren shrugged. "No, I just suddenly felt a little sentimental." Song Howren stood up and stretched. He turned around and glanced into the kitchen. He smiled. "I haven't cooked for many years. You don't have any skills, do you? Stinky brat." Song Tianyu scolded with a smile. "I went to Zhonghua Street on my way here." Song Howren suddenly said, "Luochio said he wanted to buy something so that he could visit. That's thoughtful." Song Tianyu was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled. He was very happy to hear that a descendant of the Song family would do such a thing, although it was very likely that this was just human nature and courtesy. But when one was old, it seemed that this was what they wanted to think and think about. He spent a lot of money. Song Tianyu shook his head. Song Howren said coldly, "He only bought 2 pounds of apples." When Father Song heard this, he was stunned for a moment. Then he burst out laughing. He looked at the vegetable field next to him and smiled without saying anything. Song Howren continued, "Gate of life, gate of life. Life means to live. Life means to have hope. Therefore, the gate of life is the gate of hope, the gate that gives people hope." This was what he had overheard. Song Howren spoke slowly, word for word. Even the tone was almost the same. Song Tianyu cast a puzzled look at him. Of course, he knew what the life gate meant, because it was a gate that he had specially created. Those were Luochio's exact words. Song Howren shrugged. "I just brought him there on the way and mentioned the name of the gate of life. That's why he said those words." Song Tianyu raised his head and looked at the Qingtian white clouds above his humble abode. After a long time, he let out a sigh of relief and said softly, "This Buddha jumps over the wall soup. He can withstand it. Come, bring me to see him." Old man, Song suddenly became full of energy. Ever since he left the village, he hadn't stopped to rest at all. In fact, in order to prepare the ingredients for the Buddha jumps over the wall soup, he hadn't rested since yesterday. The cooking of high-quality dried abalone took a long time, and Old Man Song had strictly requested that he do it himself. Song Howren knew how tired Old Man Song's body was, but he also knew what supported him. It was an obsession that had persisted for decades. "Have you taken your medicine today?" Song Howren asked softly. "Don't worry, I still want to live for a few more years." When Song Howren accompanied Song Tianyu to the side hall, where Luochio was standing in front of the bookshelf, flipping through something. Fifth uncle was a professional housekeeper with excellent hearing. When Song Tianyu appeared, he moved, but Song Tianyu shook his head slightly and told fifth uncle not to make a fuss. He slowly walked to the bookshelf and looked at the neat rows of books on it. There was one book missing. It was the one in Luochio's hand. "Do you like to read the history of the Ming Dynasty?" Song Tianyu asked abruptly. "Not really." Luochio closed it and explained, "It's just that this book is a little damaged, so I'm interested in reading it." For the first time, Song Tianyu sized up Luochio. He He was already 60 years old, but his rocker was very straight and gave people a sense of toughness. Song Tianyu muttered, "Because it's damaged?" Luocio nodded. "If it's not often read, it naturally won't be damaged. The fact that it's often translated means that someone likes it and that it's valuable to be read often." Song Tianyu said indifferently, "But it's also possible that it's just an individual person's interest. Some people like it sweet, and some people like it salty, but it's not necessarily what you like." Luocio said, "But whether you like it or not, you'll have to try it yourself to know." Song Tianyu suddenly stretched out his hand, and Luocio directly handed the history of the Ming dynasty to Song Tianyu. Father Song casually flipped through the pages and suddenly asked, "Tell me about the dynasty?" Luocio shook his head. "I'll only read, not comment." "The onlooker sees more clearly?" Song Tianyu stared. Luocio said indifferently, "It can't be considered a trap." Song Tianyu nodded. "That's right. Even the most complete historical materials can't completely show the truth of a dynasty. Later generations can write something infinitely close to the truth, but it's still not the truth. For example, the Along the River during the Qingming festival is just a corner of the era. Although it condenses an era, there are always some omissions." He then handed the history of the Ming dynasty to Luocio. "Since you like it, I'll give this history of the Ming dynasty to you." Luocio put the book back in its original position and said softly, "It won't be complete without one. I have to give the people behind me a chance to read it." Song Tianyu asked, "How old are you this year?" "I'll be 22 after the Lunar New Year." Luocio thought for a bit. "I was born in the first lunar month. Come, I'll take you to see something." Song Tianyu nodded and turned to leave. At the door, Song Howren saw this and hurriedly waved at Luocio, indicating for him to follow him. The boss nodded, but before he left, he put the lid back on the teacup. Fifth uncle, the butler, had sharp eyes. He glanced at him and didn't say anything, but details could reflect a person's character. He couldn't tell that this young man was pretending at all, but this was the most frightening thing. Fifth uncle didn't know what kind of education was needed to produce such a young man who was perfect at everything. What was even more inconceivable was that no matter who it was, they could feel a sense of closeness to him. Inconceivable. Fifth uncle suddenly sighed beside Song Howren. Song Howren asked curiously, "Fifth uncle, what's inconceivable?" Fifth uncle joked, "If this guest was a woman, I could describe her as a secluded orchid in an empty valley. But as a man, I really don't know how to describe her." Fifth uncle, "So you have this kind of interest?" Song Howren was stunned and then sighed. "This is why you've been single for more than 40 years. Young master." The layout of the house seemed to be much larger than it looked from the outside. This was probably due to the designer's grasp of the space structure. Song Tianyu brought Luocio to a locked room in the deepest part of the house. In the olden days, large families would set up morning halls in their houses, and there was such a place in the house. Song Tianyu pointed to a neatly arranged memorial tablet in the morning hall and then said to Luocio, "Our Song family can be traced back to the Northern Song dynasty." Zhao. The owner looked at the memorial tablet hanging at the top with the words Zhao Taizu Rue Xian Gong written on it and was slightly stunned. As if he knew Luocio's doubts, Song Tianyu said seriously, "Rue Xian Gong is a descendant of Song Taizu's second son, Yin Wang. In other words, our Song family is actually a descendant of Song Taizu. Later, when the dynasty changed, Rue Xiangong wanted to restore the family, but he couldn't win against the vicissitudes of the world. In the end, he was disheartened and died in depression. His descendants gradually gave up on this idea and changed their surnames. We took on the surname Song Wei as a memento. Over the past 1,000 years, the Song family had almost been destroyed several times, but it wasn't over yet. Until now, we've finally left some descendants. Since you're a descendant of my elder brother, you have to acknowledge your ancestors. So I want to tell you this. We're actually from the Zhao family." Luocio nodded. He was indeed a little surprised by the origins of the Song family, but he quickly recovered. Song Tianyu had been observing Luocio's expression. At this time, he nodded and said, "You're very calm, much better than I expected. When your uncle Song Howard first heard it, he wasn't as calm as you are now. Dad, it's not fair to compare a 10-year-old to a 22-year-old. Song Howard chuckled. Song Tianyu just waved his hand, but he couldn't hide the doting in his eyes. Song Howard was his only son when he was old. Naturally, he treasured him a lot. My grandfather, how did you get separated from him? Luochio asked at this time. Song Tianyu sat down and recalled something. At this time, Luochio saw something called age on Song Tianyu. Old people all had this kind of thing. At that time, the era of turmoil and chaos had just ended. A new country was established and all kinds of things were being done. But in fact, there were still many places in the country that hadn't been liberated. Song Tianyu was silent for a while before he continued. In fact, if we hadn't been invaded at the beginning of the Republic, perhaps my grandfather would have just been an honest teacher. But life was pressing, and a scholar without the strength to fight a chicken threw away his books and picked up a gun. He was still able to make a small career. There are many things that I can't remember clearly now, because at that time I was too young. His father was silent for a long time. At the beginning, the Song family was just a small local warlord, carefully surviving in the cracks of many forces. We didn't want to get anything. We just wanted to protect our home, so we got armed. But when the turn of the era came, no one could stay out of it. Your grandfather was much older than me. An elder brother is like a father. I spent my childhood with your grandfather. He taught me to memorize the 3 character classics, taught me how to ride a horse, read historical records to me, and quietly sneaked out with me to play. We hunted together and watched Shaoxing opera together. Those were the most precious days of my life, carefree and worry-free. Later on, when a new country was established, the helm of the Song family was handed over to my father, your great-grandfather. Your great-grandfather didn't want to accept anything like the founding of the country. He just wanted to retire and live a peaceful life. But our Song family still encountered a disaster. At that time, the situation was still very tense. Although the old forces retreated overseas, a large number of spies remained and destroyed the hard-won peace everywhere. Our Song family was framed. Father Song was silent for a long time. The truth of this matter hasn't been accurately determined yet. The situation was very chaotic at that time. The establishment of a new country meant that many things were overthrown and new things were about to emerge. I never doubted the spirit of the soldiers who used their blood to liberate the country. But you also have to understand that at the beginning, all of us had different backgrounds, and our thoughts weren't necessarily the same. My father didn't want to belong to some people's camp, and the consequences were predictable. It was winter, and it wasn't long before news of Yungue Chuan's liberation came. Song Tianyu's expression was a little sad. I remember that night, a lot of people suddenly came to the house. They all wore black hats and black, traditional Chinese gowns. They didn't speak. None of them said a word from beginning to end. I heard gunshots, and not long after, I saw my brother rush into my room covered in blood and pick me up. We kept running, and the people behind us kept chasing us. Father Song closed his eyes. That was the first time in my life that I saw so many dead people and blood. I don't know what war is like, but I saw what death is like. Father Song looked at Luochio. Your grandfather tied me to him with a belt to protect me. I saw that he was shot in the shoulder, and blood kept flowing. It flowed to my face. There was no other way. He chose to take a few people to lure the men in black away, and then let a few servants protect me as we escaped. We agreed on a place to meet, and he told me to be there or be square. Luochio sighed. You didn't see him. I waited for a long time. Elder father took a deep breath. Later, under the protection of my servants, I moved to Xiangjiang, then continued south, crossing the ocean to Indonesia. I grew up there. After a few years, I found out some of the truth about what happened back then, but in the dark, a mysterious force came looking for me. I had no choice but to leave again. Father Song sighed. That time, I went even further. Then, I came to this place and met a girl. She was the descendant of a coolie who was sold here to do hard labor. We fell in love, and I took root here. Father Song looked at Luochio, and his heavy heart seemed to relax a little. I made some money over the years, and I also had some power of my own. I secretly went back several times, but I couldn't find any news about my brother. I originally thought that I would never hear any news about him in this life. He suddenly grabbed Luacio's hand. His movements were fast and swift, like a fierce tiger released from its cage, and Luacio couldn't dodge in time. The old man grabbed Luacio's hand tighter and tighter, as if he was afraid that once he let go, he would never want to see him again. Today I found you. Perhaps back then, the old man's brother also held his hand tightly like this. Chapter 830. One in front of the university. After Xiao Bao got out of Lin Feng's car, he quickly said to Lin Feng, "Thank you for sending me here, Brother Feng." Li Feng waved his hand and said, Okay. Hurry up and find your professor. Get the information and come out. I still have to get something for Sir Ma." "Get what?" "Baby products." Lin Feng said helplessly, "Isn't Mrs. Ma pregnant for several months?" "Officer Ma cherishes the baby so much that he asked someone to buy a lot of baby products for him." Xiao Bao laughed and said, "When did your department become so idle?" The future star of the criminal investigation team actually has to run errands to buy baby products? Lin Feng reached out and knocked on Xiao Bao's forehead. "Aren't you playing fantasy games in the office every day? Do you still want to go in and find the professor to get the things? Otherwise, I'm leaving." "It's Professor Ouyang." Xiao Bao quickly corrected. "He is our section chief Qin's teacher. He is a very powerful forensic doctor. He came here to teach after retiring a few years ago." Okay. Ouyang is Ouyang. Go quickly." After Xiao Bao gave Lin Feng the greeting of the third finger, he hurriedly ran into the university campus. This time, he came over because he recently encountered a more difficult case. Xiao Bao heard that Professor Ouyang had handled similar cases before, so he specially came to look for information. Now that Section Chief Qin was on an indefinite leave, Xiao Bao could only rely on himself. This was Section Chief Qin's teacher. In Xiao Bao's view, he was a grandmaster-level figure, so when he arrived at the door of the office, Xiao Bao quickly tidied up his clothes. "Professor Ouyang has something to do. This is what he told me to give you." However, Xiao Bao saw a young female assistant. Xiao Bao was disappointed for a while. He had to sigh, then took the information from the other party and said, You look so familiar. Did you graduate from 4 realms? I seem to have seen you somewhere." "I'm from 5 realms." "So it's Junior's sister, since the ancestral master didn't see it. Then I'll just flirt with her." Xiao Bao blinked. Can you help me get something? These things are a little heavy." The female teaching assistant pointed at the few boxes beside her. Xiao Bao immediately patted his chest and said, "No problem." So the two of them left the office. When the office door closed, another door in the office also opened at this time. A man in a black suit took a peek and then closed the door. In this office, a bald old man was staring at him in horror. He was tied up with a rope, and there were 2 men on his left and right who were holding down his shoulders. The man in a black suit was playing with a dagger at this time. He sat on the office desk and said indifferently, "Professor Ouyang, let's continue to discuss the previous problem." He asked someone to tear off the tape on Professor Ouyang's mouth. Professor Ouyang said in horror, What do you want to do? Is it kidnapping?" The man said, "I have just explained the purpose of our visit. We just want to ask Professor Ouyang some questions. After that, Professor Ouyang will naturally be safe. So, I hope you can cooperate." The bright dagger reflected the sunlight outside and shone on Professor Ouyang's eyes. Professor Ouyang said in panic, What do you want to ask?" I don't know if Professor Ouyang still remembers the hijacking of a cash truck about 4 years ago. The man bent down. At that time, the case was very sensational. A total of 7 criminals carried a lot of weapons and had a shootout with the police. Many people had died, including a policeman named Luo Qi. "Professor Ouyang, you were still working in the bureau at that time, right? Don't tell me you have no impression of it at all." I have an impression. Professor Ouyang's face changed slightly, and then he quickly said, "Comrade Luo Qi was a very good public servant." Why do you ask about him?" The man moved the dagger to Professor Ouyang's face, I heard that the autopsy report at that time said that Luo Qi was shot 7 times. 6 of them were not fatal, but one of them was directly hit in the heart. It's a pity that such a good policeman died because of this shot. Yes, it's really a pity. Professor Ouyang nodded, but his eyes couldn't leave the dagger on his face. I heard that you personally examined Luo Qi's body, right? Professor Ouyang nodded nervously. The man suddenly said, not long after that, you applied for retirement. But at this age, retirement seems to be a matter of course. Then you came to this university and became the dean of the forensics department. Well, your wife is also a university teacher, and she has graduated now. You have a daughter who works in a state-owned enterprise, and your son-in-law is a sales manager in a 4S store. Oh, by the way, your grandson is about to enter high school, right? What do you want to do? Don't hurt my family. Professor Ouyang hurriedly struggled. The man pressed down with both hands. Don't be agitated. Listen to me first. It's reasonable to say that your family is really good and can be considered to be happy. But it's very strange, Professor. How can you have your own villa abroad? And the value is not low. Well, let me think. According to your salary, your pension, and your entire family's income, I'll give you double. He smiled and put his face close to Professor Ouyang's face. It seems that it's not enough? Professor, how did you buy it? I don't know what you're talking about. The man sneered. Professor, you're quite smart. At first, the person written on the property was not you. Then at the beginning of this year, you quietly changed hands. In addition, we found out that you have an account abroad, and there's a lot of money in it. Professor Ouyang's face changed dramatically. The man suddenly grabbed Professor Ouyang's head and slammed it on the office table. Then, he inserted the knife next to his ear and said indifferently, Professor, do you think there'll be a problem if I cut off your ear here? I'll talk. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. I'll talk. Professor Ouyang's eyes widened, his face full of horror. It's someone who secretly gave me a large sum of money to change the autopsy report. The bullet that hit Luo Qi's heart did not match the guns found at the scene. It's a gunshot wound of unknown origin. The man suddenly grabbed Professor Ouyang's neck. It's a police-made bullet. That person asked me to change it to the same type of bullet used by the criminals. The bullet was also given to me by that person. Someone gave you money? Who? The man held the professor's head and did not have the slightest intention of relaxing. This pressure made Professor Ouyang very painful. He said painfully, it's who? I don't know. He didn't tell me who he was. We've never met. We only contacted each other through the phone, but he threatened me. If I didn't do it, he wouldn't be polite to me and my family. I had no choice. Don't kill me. The man pulled out the knife and then stabbed it down. But the moment the knife was stuck on the table, Professor Ouyang's eyes widened and then he stopped moving. The man next to him looked and said, He fainted. He fainted from fright. Scoundrel. The man disdainfully knocked Professor Ouyang's head with the knife, then shook his head and said, But most heroes die in the hands of scoundrels. Big brother, what should we do with this guy? Can we trust his words? Such a cowardly guy. He can't hide anything. The man picked up Professor Ouyang's phone and checked it. Then he sneered. As for how to deal with it, oh, this professor is quite flirtatious. So many pictures of female students in bed. He's a coward and a lecher. Then let this Professor Ouyang become a celebrity. The man gave the phone to his subordinate. Deal with it. I'll go back and report to Manager Sure. The man quickly went out of the university gate and then got on a black Bentley. The person waiting in the car was Sure Shiji of Zhang Group. He looked at the man and said indifferently, Long, how did it go? The man, Long said quickly at this time, There's something wrong with this old man. Long told him the situation and then said, This guy fainted from fright. Hee, we're just scaring him a little. How can it be our turn to do something that involves blood? Sure Shiji nodded. If it weren't for the fact that Director Gao looked a little unnatural when I accidentally asked him about it during breakfast the day before yesterday, I wouldn't have been able to trace it back to Professor Ouyang. Long said, If it weren't for you, Mr. Sure, who wanted to investigate the cause of Luo Chi's death, we wouldn't have been able to find Professor Ouyang all the way when we looked through the hospital's records and found that the records were deliberately destroyed this year. Shi Shiji said indifferently. Got the result? Long speculated. Luo Chi should have been murdered. When he was fighting with the bandits, he was shot a few times, but he should have been able to be saved. But someone secretly shot him in the back. Professor Ouyang said that it was a bullet from an internal gun in the police force. But with his authoritative forensic report and the chaos at the scene, I'm afraid the truth was covered up by someone in the dark. Shi Shiji frowned. You're saying that this was done by an internal police force? Long thought for a while and said, I can't rule out this possibility, but it could also be an imitation or a lost gun in the police force. It's also possible. Shi Shiji was silent for a while, but said, the second possibility is very slim. If this was an assassination from the beginning, why would they ask Professor Ouyang to give false testimony after the fact? And they wouldn't use a murder weapon that could easily be traced. I'm guessing that the real killer was improvised at that time. Long, yes. Shi Shiji said seriously. Go and check on all the police officers who were on duty when this case happened. Several years have passed, and I'm afraid that the people in the dark have destroyed a lot of evidence. It will be very troublesome to trace them. Be careful and don't let go of any possibility. I'm going back to the old lady now. Don't worry, investigation is my strong suit. Long smiled slightly. Shi Shiji said indifferently, the ace investigator in the army, of course I believe in you. Go back to the company and get some compensation for your hard work. Let your brother do his job well. Thank you, Boss Shi. Luochio had a lot of experience in dealing with crime people. Father Song's sadness had been buried for decades, and it was better to let it go. So, letting him cry well and untie the knot in his heart was the best way. He didn't intend to persuade the old man, and Song Haoran didn't intend to comfort his father either. As for the butler, Uncle Wu, he probably had the same plan. Song Tianyou's crying started to die down, and then he sighed and finally calmed down. At that moment, Luochio handed him a handkerchief. Song Tianyou stared blankly for a moment before taking it and wiping away his tears. He then smiled awkwardly. Very few young people carry handkerchiefs. Luochio smiled. Probably because I'm more old-fashioned, and using a handkerchief isn't as wasteful and is more environmentally friendly. A gentleman's words are gentle like jade. Father Song smiled slightly and suddenly said, Can you give me this handkerchief? Luochio nodded. Father Song then said, Go to the front and light a few incense sticks. Consider it a greeting to your ancestors. Luochio readily complied. Only then did Father Song say, It's about time, let's go eat. Apart from filling one's stomach, eating also had the meaning of gathering. This was a way for people to communicate with each other. A square table, a small hall, 3 people and 4 stools. There seemed to be one person missing, probably the niece Song Haoran had mentioned before, Song Ying. Grandfather, uncle. Not long after Luochio and the other 2 sat down, a clear and melodious voice came from the side door of the small hall. It was still that very well-tailored Chong Sam, and the pink hair that was immediately noticeable. But because of the lighting, there seemed to be a hint of purple in the pink. Under the light, the color changed wonderfully from different angles, constantly changing. Father Song pointed at the Chong Sam girl and said, This is Song Ying, my niece. This is Luochio. Song Tianyou slowly exhaled. He's my elder brother's grandson, a direct descendant of our Song family. Fifth uncle's heart trembled slightly. Even though he had already guessed this before his father had brought him to the morning hall, and his words in the morning hall had also proven this point, it was still Father Song's words that were the most shocking. Because Song Tianyou's words directly established Luochio's status in the Song family far away in South America, the eldest son and grandson. Song Tianyou was a person who attached great importance to traditional etiquette, and it hadn't changed even after so many years. Even though he had single-handedly created a new Song family empire, he had never said that he was the head of the Song family in front of the people closest to him. Father Song said that this belonged to his elder brother, and he was only giving it to his elder brother to take care of and take good care of. because without his elder brother, there wouldn't be him. Song Ying, we've met. Chapter 831. Old Man Song was a traditional person, but that didn't mean he couldn't accept new trends. An old-fashioned parent would find it hard to accept his child dyeing Song Ying's hair color. She even dyed her slender eyebrows the same color. You met? When? Old Man Song was very curious about the meeting between Song Ying and Luochio. Song Ying sat down. There were only 4 stools at the square table, but there were 5 sets of bowls and chopsticks. Song Ying's stool was arranged to the right of Luochio, while Song Howren's was to the left of Luochio. Of course, the square table was spacious enough that it wasn't crowded at all. After Song Ying sat down, she said calmly, "I heard that a distinguished guest came to my humble home, so I took some tea leaves from grandfather to greet him." Luochio smiled and said, "Miss Song also told me the story of Junshan's silver needle." "Oh, is that so?" Old Man Song chuckled and looked at Luochio. "Don't judge this child by her appearance. She's quite good at brewing tea. It's a pity that some people don't know how to appreciate it." Song Ying smiled faintly. Luochio wasn't angry. He really didn't know how to appreciate it. Secondly, although this Miss Song was a bit confrontational, it was much better than a certain Shinryu who opened a pet hospital who wanted to use force on their first meeting. "Yes, it's a bit of a waste." Luochio nodded. "I don't know how to taste it, but I feel that the taste is okay." Also, when Miss Song made the tea, it was very pleasing to the eye. "Thank you." Song Ying thanked him graciously and smiled. "Then I'll take it as a compliment." Song Howren could easily sense the hostility in Song Ying's eyes. He awkwardly looked back and forth between Luochio and Song Ying, then helplessly looked at Old Man Song. The palm of the hand was flesh, and the back of the hand was flesh. Although Luochio was a direct descendant of the Song family, he doted on his late sister's child from the bottom of his heart. Originally, Song Howren wasn't much older than Song Ying. Although they were uncle and niece in terms of seniority, the way they interacted with each other was more like a sibling relationship. Old Man Song chuckled and looked at Luochio. "Luochio, do you think Little Ying is pretty?" Luochio thought for a while and said casually, "Missing should be a beauty that meets the public's aesthetic standards." Old Man Song narrowed his eyes and said, "I'm asking you." Luochio looked at Song Ying. In the black and white world, the ball of spiritual light that hid the radiance of life was constantly changing. Luochio said softly, "It's very special. It emits a kind of captivating brilliance." Song Howren's mouth gaped open, as if this was the first time he was meeting Luochio. Song Ying frowned. She felt that under Luochio's gaze, she subconsciously wanted to find a place to hide. But she suddenly felt uneasy. Old Man Song's questions were too sensitive. Almost anyone could see that Old Man Song was plotting something in his heart. "So you like her?" Old Man Song's eyes lit up, and he immediately followed up with another question. Song Ying suddenly became nervous, but she didn't show it. At the same time, she focused on her hearing. "I like beautiful things," Luochio said softly, "but it's not the love between men and women. You want to have a girlfriend." Song Howren subconsciously rubbed the space between his eyebrows. Old Man Song nodded and said, "Everyone has the heart to love beauty. Appreciating beauty is a good thing. It's getting late. Old 5, serve the dishes." "Yes, master." Fifth uncle clapped his hands a few times. Then a group of maids lined up on the left and right. Each of them held a different dish in their hands and served it. Fifth uncle introduced each dish. "Ham and bamboo shoot soup. It's made with the best Jinhua ham and dried bamboo shoots. The soup base is made with old hen, cabbage, dried scallops, and old ginseng. The fire is sweet and mellow, while the dried bamboo shoots are fresh." The Tang Tu Song art also says, "Ginseng alone earns a good name. Its blood can be rejuvenated. The concentrated juice of ginseng should be known as a great strength." This is eggplant. It's dried eggplant that has been cut into slices and pickled with vinegar. Then, it's paired with various kinds of chicken fur, shiitake mushrooms, and other 7 kinds of fungi, spiced dried tofu, winter bamboo shoots, and dried fruits. Mixed with sesame oil and seasoning. Eggplant is salty and fresh. It has a rich wine aroma, a slight sweetness, and a brilliant color. In addition, this dish comes from Story of the Stone. When Granny Lou visited the Grandview Garden, it was the most detailed dish. It took more than 10 minutes for the 9 dishes to be introduced one by one. This was probably the necessary preparation before enjoying the delicious food. The Song family seemed to have already gotten used to this tradition. At this moment, Luaccio couldn't help but think of Renziling. If she was here, she probably wouldn't care so much and would directly stuff a mouthful of the dish in her mouth. When the last dish was served, Father Song suddenly stood up. He personally took a jar from a servant and placed it in the center of the square table. He looked at Luaccio and said, "Buddha jumps over the wall. There are exactly 10 dishes, and it means perfection." Luaccio nodded. At this moment, Song Howard said, "Luaccio, do you know that the people of our Song family must eat the Buddha jumps over the wall made by the elders themselves?" Luaccio asked curiously, "Is it an ancestral rule?" Father Song nodded and said, "Let me tell you a story. In the Ming Dynasty, there was a family with 4 bare walls. Only the mother and son depended on each other for survival. His mother worked as a helper in a restaurant, pouring tea for the customers. Because of their poverty, the child never enjoyed anything and was often bullied. On the day of the child's 10th birthday, the mother came back very late. However, when she came back, she brought back a jar of Buddha jumps over the wall, made with all kinds of expensive ingredients. How do you think this child's mother managed to get her hands on these precious ingredients?" Luaccio thought for a moment and said, "Restaurant? Was it leftovers?" Father Song nodded. "That's right, it was leftovers." That day, a rich family held an extremely luxurious birthday celebration for the old man. However, there were many leftovers on each table. Thus, the mother took a little from each table, put in a jar, and brought it home. Father Song kept looking at Luaccio's expression. The mother didn't hide the origin of this jar of Buddha jumps over the wall. She told the child, when these dishes were made, the chef tasted them, so the first person to eat them was actually the one who ate the leftovers. You're no different from other people's children. You're also a rich person. Later on, the child obtained scholarly honors, and his family gradually developed. Later on, he set a family rule. That is, no matter how poor or rich the next generation is, the elders must personally make Buddha jumps over the wall for their descendants. Do you know why? Luaccio said, "Is it to reminisce about the past?" Father Song shook his head and said seriously, "It's to let the younger generation know that we will give them the best. No matter how this thing came about, it's what we gave it to them. We did our best to give it to them. I've eaten it, your grandfather has eaten it, Howard has eaten it, and Song Ying has eaten it. Everyone in the Song family has eaten it. Only you and your father haven't eaten it." With that said, Song Tianyu stood up and silently picked up the 5th set of bowls and chopsticks. Then he scooped a spoonful into his bowl and placed it next to Luaccio. Then he scooped a spoonful into Luaccio's bowl. "Today, I'll personally make it for you. You eat it with him." Luaccio nodded. He picked up the bowl and tasted it before closing his eyes. The feelings poured into it easily melted in his taste buds. Perhaps it was because of Father Song's story, or perhaps it was because there was an extra bowl next to him. As the mellow and rich soup slid down, the memories brought by the taste also flashed through his mind. The mother and son from a distant time and space seemed to appear in front of him. Under the dim yellow candlelight, the mother personally scooped out a bowl of Buddha jumps over the wall in front of the wooden table. She continued to sew the child's clothes, and he ate with relish. Riches and honor were far away, but the warmth brought by the candlelight was right beside him. Luaccio suddenly understood how his grandfather felt when he lured Song Tianyu's enemies away. He also understood Father Song's persistence in finding his family for decades. This was a kind of inheritance. For hundreds of years, generation after generation had condensed the spirit of Buddha jumps over the wall. The previous generation left an imprint on the next generation through the taste. To give you the best, a very heartwarming taste. Luaccio put down the bowl and smiled. At the same time, a drop of tear fell from his eyes. A cold home is not cold. The clothes and the bedding are all new. I don't know if you're used to it. Let's live here first. After the meal, Father Song left early. He had worked hard for 2 days to prepare tonight's meal. For someone his age, it was quite unbearable, so he went to bed early. Perhaps he still needed a quiet and private space to calm himself down. Song Howard brought Luochio to a unique room. Then, he stretched and said, "I'm also tired. Let's call it a day. Rest well. Someone will take you around this place early in the morning." Luochio nodded and passed the time in the room by himself. He sat in front of the desk and flipped open a book that Father Song asked fifth uncle to send over. Although it was called a book, it was actually only a few pages. The recipe of Buddha jumps over the wall that he ate tonight was said to have been passed down from the ancestors. Every member of the Song family had to learn how to make this dish. This was the only copy that had been passed down from generation to generation. The writing was already a little blurry. Luochio thought for a while, then took out a pen and paper and slowly copied it down. Not long after, there was a sudden knock on the door. After Luochio put away the newly copied recipe, he opened the door and saw Song Ying. "Miss Song, is there anything else you want to talk to me about?" She wasn't wearing the qipao that outlined her curves. Her hair was casually draped behind her back, and there was the fragrance of a shower. She was wearing a denim skirt and a short-sleeved shirt, looking cool. At this moment, she was leaning against the door of Luochio's room. When she saw Luochio open the door and come out, she sized him up and said indifferently, "You're quite good at acting. Where are you?" Song Ying sneered. "My grandfather is a very sentimental person, especially towards his relatives. However, don't think that you can do whatever you want in the Song family and get any benefits just because you casually say a few nice words, cry a few tears, and pretend to be obedient in front of my grandfather. Don't worry, I'm not interested in the Song family's wealth." Luochio smiled. "I just want to know more about my grandfather. That's why I came here." "Is that so?" Song Ying said indifferently. "I wonder if you can still say such pretty words after truly understanding our Song family's wealth and power? It's already so late." Looking at Miss Song's attire, "Are you planning to go out?" "Then I won't disturb you," Luochio said coldly. Ignoring Song Ying's expression, Luochio closed the door with both hands. But the moment the door was about to close, a white palm was placed across the gap. Luochio asked, "Is there anything else?" Song Ying said indifferently, "Grandfather asked me to be your tour guide tomorrow and have a good tour. But there's nothing to see during the day. Let's go now." "Now?" Song Ying blinked and said, "What? Are you afraid that I'll eat you up? You can see more things at night, but if you don't want to, that's not a problem. I'll still find you a tour guide at the travel agency tomorrow. Don't count on me, because I still have a lot of work to do." "Okay, then I'll have to trouble you, Miss Song." Luochio nodded. "Call me Song Ying." Song Ying said indifferently, "No matter what, you have the Song family's blood flowing in your body. My grandfather won't like it if you call me that." "Then where are we going?" Luochio smiled. "Follow me." Song Howard had just finished showering when the butler, Uncle Wu, knocked on the door and entered. Song Howard put on a towel and sat down. At the same time, he poured himself a glass of tequila. "Uncle Wu, what's the matter?" "Eldest young master. Missing just left with young Master Chiao." "Xiao Ying?" Song Howard was startled. Then he frowned. "Does father know?" Uncle Wu shook his head and said, "Master has been tired for 2 days. He fell asleep after returning to his room. I didn't wake him up. However, I've already called a group of people to follow them. There shouldn't be any problems." Song Howard shook the glass in his hand and sighed. "I'm not afraid of any danger. I'm just afraid that Xiao Ying will be at a disadvantage." "Missing?" Uncle Wu couldn't help but be surprised. "How is that possible?" Song Howard smiled and said, "Don't be fooled by my newly found nephew's temper. He's easy to get along with. However, this kind of person is the real stubborn one. We all know what father said today. It's normal for Xiao Ying to have some reaction." Uncle Wu said, "Master, there's something I want to ask you. What do you think about this Master Chiao? So you and Xiao Ying have different thoughts. You're not worried about the same thing?" Song Howard said indifferently. Uncle Wu frowned and said, "The eldest son is the grandson of the first wife. This is what Master said himself. Moreover, Master seems to be planning to strengthen the marriage." Song Howard shook his head. He looked at the swirls of the tequila in his glass and said indifferently, Song Howren, don't tell me that without this Song family property, there's no way to build another Song family. I don't mean to deny Master's ability. Song Howren smiled. Then he looked at the night sky outside the window. Life is still a little challenging. Besides, he might not think much of the Song family. Not think much of? Uncle Wu was stunned. The Song family it's probably a kind of intuition. Song Howren suddenly said, what he sees might be different from what we see. Song Howren suddenly took a sip of the tequila in his glass. While playing with the sun god badge on his body, he said to himself, that gaze, it's really like that black-horned python. Yin, PS1. There was a delay. I just saw it. Thank you to my book friend, Yin, for the tip. PS2. Bowing to the forces of capitalism. PS3. There will be more chapters. There will definitely be more chapters. Chongyang is quite busy these days, so it's not today. Tomorrow, maybe possible. The day after tomorrow, no way. The day after tomorrow should be possible. Chapter 832. In Caroline's memory, her memories of the campus, as well as any memories of the campus, stopped at the junior high school stage. What was a university? She had actually received many rich university students and had heard many stories of these university students who came out to have fun. But what was a university? The dormitory of Arnold's classmate was in the boys' area. To Caroline's surprise, Arnold had the key to this dormitory. In this regard, Arnold's explanation was, the accommodation fee is too high, much more expensive than the house I rented, so I applied for off-campus accommodation. However, the person who originally lived here had a good relationship with me. He secretly gave me a key so that I could rest here when I couldn't leave in time. Come in. The double room was very clean. The bed on the left looked very messy. Caroline even found a pair of women's underwear. As for the bed on the right, it was very neat and tidy. Even the quilt was folded into a square with distinct corners. Sometimes he brings his girlfriend here, too. Arnold smiled awkwardly at the woman's underwear that Caroline had found. Caroline expressed her understanding and then asked, but what if your classmate comes back? Arnold said he recently went to an enterprise outside for an internship. He basically won't come back. Don't worry. By the way, you sit here for a while. I'll go buy some food. Caroline hesitated a little. An uneasiness appeared on her face. When Arnold opened the door, he showed a reassuring smile. It's okay. It's safe here. Caroline nodded. But after Anual left, he locked the door from the inside. She hurriedly went to the window and stared at the situation downstairs. Soon after, she saw Arnold walking out of the dormitory and walking to a convenience store not far away. Anual also seemed to be very careful. He kept looking left and right. Gradually, he disappeared under the shade of the trees on the campus path. Caroline breathed a sigh of relief. She felt sticky all over. She hadn't taken a shower for several days. She walked into the bathroom provided by the dormitory. The weather was hot, so she took a cold shower. When the cold water sprayed out of the shower sprinkled on her body, Caroline took a deep breath. The sudden drop in temperature stimulated the pores all over her body. Caroline closed her eyes. In the darkness, the scene at the crossroads in the morning suddenly appeared in his mind, the mother pushing the baby stroller. Caroline shuddered. She rushed to the mirror and looked at her eyes again. The whites of her eyes were still a little bloodshot, but it didn't seem to affect her vision. She stood in front of the mirror in a daze, looking at her own appearance, anticipating what would happen, or rather, anticipating what she would see. She was conscious. What she saw in the morning and the gas explosion in the bathroom of the restaurant last night was not an illusion or a coincidence. Something must have happened to her, so much so that she thought back to an earlier time, to the dream she had. She was being chased by something very dangerous. She was running away, but she couldn't get rid of it. In the end, she fell into endless darkness. Caroline subconsciously stroked her lower abdomen again. Has it been taken away? If it was the ability to see the future, it didn't seem to be something he could control. Caroline stood there for a long time, but nothing happened in the end. She couldn't think of anything. She even imagined that this ability to see the future would only happen a few times. Was it accurate every time? It took Arnold about half an hour to come back from outside, carrying a lot of food and water. Caroline unlocked the door and let Arnold in. After entering the door, Arnold glanced at Caroline in a daze. Caroline, who had just showered, simply wore a white shirt at this time. Her hair was wet and scattered, and the white shirt gradually hung down to the front of her thighs. Anua seemed to make a gulping motion. Caroline was very generous. "My clothes are dirty. You don't mind if I wear this, right? I found it on the bed here. It should be yours, right? It's okay. You can wear it." Arnold hurriedly walked past Caroline with the things and walked to the desk by the window. He hurriedly took out the things in the bag. "It's mine. I left a few more clothes here as a backup. Do you want to eat something? I bought bread, potato chips, and chocolate beans." Caroline walked to Arnold's side. She didn't mind that her arm was pressed against Arnold's arm at this time. She picked up a bottle of beer from the bag. Pop! It was the sound of the can lid being pulled up. Caroline sat directly on the bed and casually crossed her legs. Arnaud glanced at Caroline and found that she was still wearing underwear. Caroline seemed to have noticed Arnaud's gaze, so she gave Arnaud a faint smile. Arnold hurriedly looked out of the window, then sat down, opened a bottle of beer, and drank. "Nerd?" Caroline shook her head. Arnold didn't speak for a long time. He looked out of the window in a daze until the sky turned completely dark. He turned on the desk lamp, then turned his head. He opened his mouth to say something, but found that Caroline had already fallen asleep. She slept on her side, her slender legs overlapped. She was using her arm as a pillow. She should be fast asleep. Arnold swallowed again, then stood up and slowly walked to the bed. He quietly reached out his hand toward Caroline's face. Arnaud's fingers stopped when they were about to touch Caroline's cheek. He began to move his arm. His fingers slid down along the curve of Caroline's body. He didn't really touch her, just an illusion of 1 or 2 centimeters away. Caroline suddenly moved and turned around. Arnold retracted his hand like lightning. He was relieved to find that the other party had just changed her sleeping position. He let out a long sigh, then pulled out the quilt and covered Caroline's body. Arnaud then sat down at the table. He glanced back at Caroline and saw that she didn't move. Then, he quickly took out a key from his pocket. He unlocked the desk drawer, then reached out to take out something from his clothes and put it directly into the drawer. He quickly locked the drawer again and put away the key. He glanced at Caroline again, but she still didn't move. Arnold then lay down on the desk. Not long after, he fell asleep. In her deep sleep, Caroline suddenly showed a trace of pain. Her fingers grasped the bedsheets tightly, and fine beads of sweat oozed out of her forehead. It was still the same dream. Under the light, the tattooed man, the Boston boss, and the rest, they were frantically stuffing something into their mouths. She struggled frantically, struggled. It was very painful. In the end, Caroline stopped struggling. Her whole body went limp. In the end, there was no movement. It seemed that she had died. The roaring sound of an engine could be heard. From one end of the long road to the other, it was like a long lens that had been crossed in an instant. The speed of the red Hennessy Viper GT had conquered the road in an instant, causing the cars on the road to shrink back one after another. Son of a bitch, a red Viper GT. Who is that? The little princess of the Song Dynasty group? The Hennessy Viper GT could no longer be seen on the long road. At this moment, a few luxurious private cars appeared on the road. However, compared to the breathtaking Hennessy Viper GT, these luxurious cars seemed to pale in comparison. "Fifth uncle, I'm sorry. We lost Miss Ing. Got it. You guys come back first. Let the people of the second and third teams wait in front. Be careful to hide. Don't let Miss Ing find out. If anything happens, report to me at any time." Understood. The car slowly stopped at a winding mountain road. This city was surrounded by lakes on 3 sides. From here, one could overlook the endless sea. The annoying fly has been shaken off. Song-Ing opened the door and walked out first. "Come out. This is the place with the best scenery. It's better than the scenic spots that the tour group took us to. It's really not bad." Luochio also walked out of the car. He came to the railing of the road and looked ahead. The night view, the sea view, the entire city could be seen at a glance. At this time, Song Ying took out 2 bottles of sparkling water from the small refrigerator in the car. You're quite brave. You drove so fast, but you didn't panic at all. Luochio took the sparkling water from Song Ying and smiled slightly. Because I often take fast cars, so I trained a bit. Also, I happen to be a female driver, so it's not too abrupt. However, the speed is really fast. Song Ying drank the sparkling water and looked at Luochio. Female driver? Girlfriend? Family. Luochio looked at the horizon. The sea breeze was gentle. Song Ying played with her hair and shrugged. She suddenly said, "Can you drive?" Luochio thought for a while and said, "I've only driven a women's Mini. It's my family's, but I don't have a driver's license. Do you want to try?" Song Ying suddenly pointed at her Hennessy Viper GT and said, "Drive it. No traffic police will trouble you, and you don't need a driver's license. Our relationship is quite good." Luochio blinked. "You can think of it that way." Song Ying smiled. "However, I prefer to call it a privilege of the Song family." Luochio didn't resist trying new things. Moreover, driving an expensive sport car was also a good experience. Luochio readily agreed. The two exchanged positions. Luochio looked at the steering wheel and the dashboard. He suddenly felt that he didn't know where to start. Song Ying directly started the engine and said indifferently, "The basic operation is the same. However, I modified this car later. Don't step on the accelerator too hard when you start. This is your first time driving it, so take your time to get used to it. Come, put your hand here." Song Ying even grabbed Luochio's hand and put on the steering wheel. You don't need to use one hand to drive a sports car. The Viper slowly moved on the mountain road. It was quite stable. Song Ying nodded and said, "You've adapted quickly. You can try to speed up. Pay attention to the front. There are many curves in this mountain road." She was a very qualified coach. "Where are we going next?" Luochio looked at Song Ying and asked, "Are we going to the top of the mountain?" There was a fork in the road ahead, the mountain road up and the mountain road down. "I'm not interested in accompanying you to the top of the mountain to watch the sunrise." Song Ying said, "Let's go down the mountain. I'll tell you how to go after we get down the mountain. The car is still too slow. Go faster." "It's fine." Luochio shook his head. "There's a speed limit here. I said don't care about these rules." Song Ying frowned. "Rules are made by people. They're meant to be broken." Luochio shook his head. "Then it's a mess." Song Ying sneered and shook her head. She simply opened the window and let the night wind blow in. Although the performance of the sports car was not fully displayed, it seemed to be stable and maintained at the speed limit. The sound of the engine still echoed in the mountains. Song Ying gradually found that although the car was not speeding, this guy was unexpectedly stable. It seemed that he was steadily maintaining the same speed. "How'd he do it?" "Your car is quite stable." Song Ying frowned. Luochio said softly, "I'm used to it. I have a family member who sometimes falls asleep in the car when she is too tired from work. If the car is too bumpy, it will wake her up." "Is that so?" Song Ying pondered. Then she suddenly said, "Turn left up ahead and drive in from 3rd Avenue. Accompany me to a place. I heard that you know the language here." "Fine. Keep driving along 3rd Avenue and stop at the Empire Hotel. I'll take a nap." "Okay." Song Ying closed her eyes. Apart from the sound of the engine, she really did feel quite stable. Unknowingly, she was really sleepy. Later, Song Ying's head tilted to the side, causing her body to tilt forward. But because she was wearing a seatbelt, she was immediately restrained and woke up. When she woke up, Song Ying found that she was still in the car. She looked around and found that the car had stopped. About 40 to 50 meters ahead was the entrance to the Empire Hotel she had mentioned earlier, and the sport car was now parked in a parking space beside the road. She looked at Luochio, finding that this guy was folding something with banknotes. It looked like a paper crane. "How long have we been here?" Song Ying frowned. "A while." Luochio concentrated on folding the paper crane, saying softly, "I thought you must be tired, so I didn't wake you up." Song Ying subconsciously looked at the time on her phone. It was already past 12:39. She remembered that it was only 10 o'clock when they started going down the mountain. It took less than half an hour to get to the hotel from the mountain road. This guy, boring. Song Ying glanced at Luochio. What a waste of time. Luocio smiled. But you should be refreshed. It's not too bad. Luocio put the folded paper crane on the steering wheel. Get off. Song Ying opened the door, feeling inexplicably irritated. Almost at the same time, a black private car drove to the entrance of Zhonghua Street. Almost all the shops were closed, and the restaurants were also in the final stage of closing. Only 2 or 3 bars were still open. Chapter 833. This dynasty hotel was not very tall, but it occupied a very large area. Just the fountain in front of the door was half the size of a basketball court. Everyone they met along the way was unusually respectful to Song Ying. For Luocio, who knew the local language, this was enough to determine the relationship between the dynasty hotel and the Song family. This hotel is a chain hotel under the Song dynasty group. This is the headquarters, Song Ying said indifferently. Song dynasty. You should know from the name. This is the Song family's business. You plan to show me around the Song family's business? Luocio looked around. Even though it was late at night, there were still many cars coming in and out. Most of them were luxurious cars. The guests were either rich or respectable. No, Song Ying said directly. We've already toured this place. It's now my working hours. Thanks to you, my work today has been delayed until now. I'm really sorry, Luocio said apologetically. At this moment, 3 men, 1 in front and 2 behind, quickly walked towards Song Ying. Song Ying pointed at the man in the lead and said, "This is Oda's, the general manager of this hotel." Missing. The general manager, named Oda's, nodded at Song Ying. Then, he looked at the young man beside Song Ying with a puzzled expression. In the general manager's impression, this little princess of the Song family rarely had male companions around her. Moreover, from the looks of it, this person's clothes were somewhat ordinary. However, this general manager did not dare to look down on someone who could make the little princess of the Song family accompany her. Missing. Who is this gentleman? Don't worry about him. He came with me. Song Ying waved her hand and led the way into the hotel. As she walked, she said, "No need to waste time. Report as we go. Are the documents ready?" "They are ready. We can execute them after you sign them," Otis quickly said. At the same time, he waved his hand. The 2 assistants he brought along hurried to Song Ying's side. Then, they took out the documents from their briefcases. Song Ying walked and looked at them as she said, "Start reporting." Otis quickly said, "There's nothing special about our daily work. There are 2 things. The first thing is that Sir Suriko wishes to book our dragon room for his 40th wedding anniversary with his wife." Song Ying quickly signed a document and didn't look up when she heard this. "He's not qualified. Tell him that Rueha Hall could be used by him. Why is this week's maintenance fee 10% higher than last week?" Ortiz said, "Oh, it's because of the new air conditioners. It was reported last week." I remember now." Song Ying nodded. "What's the second thing?" Ortiz said, "The second matter is about the gambling hall." Otiz's voice was a little low as he subconsciously turned around to look behind him. From the beginning, Song Ying was escorted by Otiz and the other 2, while Luocio followed behind unhurriedly. "You can just say it. I told you not to mind it." Song Ying also realized what Otis was afraid of, so she subconsciously turned around. However, before she could finish her sentence, she frowned. "Where is he? That mister should have been following behind us just now. When did he disappear?" Otis quickly looked at the 2 assistants. "Did you see him?" The 2 assistants shook their heads blankly. "I'll send someone to look for him right away." Otis quickly looked at Song Ying. "Then why aren't you going?" Song Ying said in a low voice. "If you can't find him, don't come to work tomorrow." "But you just said don't mind it." Song Ying could not help but look anxious. Even if she did not have a good impression of Luocio, she did not dare to simply lose him. This was the grandson of her grandfather, her elder brother who had been searching for decades. She could not even imagine how furious Song Tianyu would be if she lost him. "I'll go look for him too." Song Ying slapped the document in her hand on one of the assistants. But just as Song Ying walked out, she already saw Luocio, but there was a little girl in pajamas beside Luocio. "I saw this child walking alone and looked quite scared. Since you are busy, I won't disturb you." Luocio held the little girl's hand and walked to the front of everyone. Then he asked, "This child seems to be lost. Can you help find her parents?" "Oh, please leave it to me." Otis quickly stood up and said, "You go and check it out." The two assistants hurriedly took out their phones. Song Ying walked directly to Luochio and said in a low voice, "Please don't disappear without a word next time. This will cause trouble." Her voice was a little loud. Luochio nodded and said softly, "I'll be careful, but can you lower your voice? You'll scare me." Luochio looked at the little girl who was holding his hand. The little girl raised her head and looked at the angry Song Ying in horror. Then she hid behind Luochio. Song Ying was stunned. Then she opened her mouth, but the words she wanted to say were stuck in her throat. "We found the child's parents." Soon after, Otis came back with his men and brought back the news of the missing child's parents. The little girl was now brought to an empty living room. Song Ying asked the chef on duty to cook a lot of food. Unfortunately, the little girl seemed to be very afraid of this big sister. From the beginning to the end, she only hid behind Luochio and refused to let go of his arm to protect him. Am I that scary? Song Ying could not help but laugh at herself. She simply did not want to provoke this child. "Have you found them? Where are they?" Song Ying looked at Otis and asked. Otis said, "The couple is now playing in the gambling hall. Our men have informed them, and they're on their way here." As he spoke, Otis glanced at the little girl and said, "This couple probably took advantage of the fact that the child was asleep and secretly went to the gambling hall to play. But they didn't expect the child to wake up in the middle of the night and not see them, so she ran out to look for them. It's okay missing. It's just a false alarm." Just as Otis had said, the little girl's father was quickly brought here. "I'm really sorry for causing you trouble." Probably because they knew that they were in the wrong, the couple didn't say anything and looked vexed. The hotel would not criticize the guests, and Otis only said a few words to be more careful next time. That was all he could do to get rid of the guests. The child's parents planned to take the child away. But at this moment, the little girl pulled Luochio's sleeve. Luochio squatted down. "Is there anything else?" "Thank you, big brother." Unexpectedly, the little girl directly kissed Luochio's face, then glanced at Song Ying timidly, and quickly ran to her parents' side. Song Ying's expression was quite complicated. She felt that in the child's world, she had been categorized as the bad guy. Yes, this child is a beauty. She'll definitely be beautiful when she grows up. Song Ying said sarcastically, "Do you want to consider it?" Luochio stood up slowly and completely ignored Song Ying's suggestion. Instead, he asked, "Is there a gambling hall here?" "Isn't that nonsense?" Song Ying rolled her eyes. "Why do you think there are so many people here at this time of night?" "All right, Otis, you mentioned the gambling hall just now, right? What's the matter?" Otis glanced at Luochio. Song Ying said, "Just say it." "I said to ignore this person." "But you just told me not to come to work tomorrow." Otis cleared his throat and said, "It's like this. Our people have found the whereabouts of the god of gamblers." Song Ying's eyes lit up. "You finally found him? Have you made contact with him? Where is he?" "I didn't expect him to be hiding in a manor near the suburbs." Otis quickly said, "Our people haven't made contact with him yet, but it seems that other people have found him too. For what I can see, these fellows probably have the same intention." Song Ying said, "The new Supreme King of Gambling Tournament is about to begin. The other families are probably going there because of him and want to invite him to represent them. There's no need to wait. We can't let the other families beat us to it. Get our people to make contact with the god of gamblers. No matter how high the price, we must invite the god of gamblers. I don't want to lose to that Zhong woman from China again this year." Otis hesitated. I heard that the representative from the Four Seasons group is the disciple of the god of gamblers. If our purpose of inviting him is to deal with our own disciple, I'm afraid he won't agree so easily. You guys go and state your conditions first. If it doesn't work out, I'll meet him personally." Song Ying snorted. "Okay, I understand." Otis then said, "All right, Miss Song, the person you asked me to bring over is here. Do you want to meet him now? Is it the other way around?" Song Ying nodded and said calmly, "Then send him over." Song Ying then walked to Luochio and smiled. "Come, I'll show you something good." "Something good?" Luochio was curious. Song Ying said calmly. You'll know when you see it. All right, do you have phobia of blood? Phobia of blood? Song Ying only smiled mysteriously. It was a very luxurious suite with a living room, a master bedroom, and everything else. In fact, rather than a suite, it would be more accurate to call an independent villa in the Empire Hotel. There was a small bridge in front of the door and a fish pond. There was also a rugged rockery in the garden. In fact, this independent villa could be described as a mansion. When Song Ying accompanied Luochio across the small wooden bridge, she suddenly stopped and said, Do you believe that there are crocodiles down there? What species are they? Luochio walked to the railing and looked down. He asked curiously, Are they hiding there? How many are there in total? This fellow, Song Ying sneered and walked down the small bridge. You'll know what species they are later. Let's go. After passing through the garden in front of the door, Odas and the others accompanied them to the open-air tea house outside the villa. The square tea house was dug deep into the ground, about 60 centimeters below the ground. When Luochio and the others arrived, there were already several men in black suits waiting for them. At the same time, there was a man in his 30s lying on the ground. He was a Caucasian. This guy was only wearing a white shirt and trousers. There were bloodstains on the white shirt. Some of the bloodstains were completely dark. It was likely that he had been beaten up for a long time. Missing. The people waiting greeted her in unison. Song Ying sat down and pointed to the seat beside her, indicating for Luochio to sit down as well. At this time, the Caucasian man who was lying on the ground quickly crawled over. However, he was quickly pressed to the ground by the men in suits. Missing, please let me go. Please let me go. I won't dare to do it again. I won't dare to do it again. The Caucasian man was terrified and begging for mercy. This person is a gambler. Song Ying looked at Luochio and said indifferently, but he cheated in our gambling hall and was caught by us. The evidence is conclusive. According to our rules, if you are caught cheating, one of your hands will be cut off. Hearing this, the Caucasian man who was pressed to the ground struggled desperately. Missing. Let me go. Let me go. Don't cut off my hand. I beg you. I beg you. I was forced to do it. Let me go. Let me go. Forced to do it. Song Ying suddenly nodded. Actually, we are forced to do it many times. If you follow our rules, the money you win is yours. If you lose, it's also yours. However, you cheated, so you should know what kind of consequences you have to bear. Song Ying waved her hand. The men exerted more force, then pulled out the Caucasian man's right hand and put on the tea table. Then, another man took out a machete. No, no, Without any mercy, the man with the machete directly covered the Caucasian man's arm with a white cloth and then chopped the machete in his hand. Under the Caucasian man's shrill scream, a broken hand fell directly on the wooden floor under the tea table. The Caucasian man had fainted from the pain. After the big man released him, he collapsed on the ground, motionless. Get rid of him. Song Ying glanced at him indifferently. At this time, several men directly lifted the Caucasian man's body and then picked up the broken hand at the same time. They didn't go far, but directly threw the man into a pond not far away. In the darkness, the predator was stimulated by the smell of blood, and the water suddenly became turbulent. In the darkness, a huge creature suddenly pounced on the Caucasian man's body, crazily biting and tearing. The scream sounded again, but it didn't sound for long before disappearing. Only the splashing water and bubbles from the pond were still rippling on the water surface. Did you see the species of this crocodile? Song Ying looked at Luochio at this time, revealing a beautiful smile. Luochio said indifferently, Didn't you say that the rules were only to cut off his hand? Why did you kill him? Song Ying said slowly, He cheated, so he cut off his hand. But after all, he cheated, and he succeeded several times. This matter can't be spread because it will affect the reputation of our gambling hall, so we can only kill him. Grandfather said that you can rely on your own ability to steal something from our Song family, but if you rely on cheating, then I'm sorry. Luochio asked curiously, Since you can successfully cheat, isn't it a reflection of strength? Song Ying smiled slightly. That's right, it's a reflection of strength. It's a pity that our Song family is stronger, so we set the rules. We can say that this is strength, but we can also say that this is cheating. Song Ying stroked her long hair. On the other hand, if one day we meet someone stronger than us, our life and death will be in the hands of others. Just like this man, maybe I will be thrown to feed the crocodiles or caught as a slave and played with until I'm rotten. She stood up, then walked in front of Luaccio, bent down, put her hands on the back of Luaccio's chair, and pressed down on him. My parents died in an assassination. The enemy is our Song family's opponent. She leaned forward, almost touching Luaccio's face. Tomorrow, maybe tomorrow you will also have the same ending. Do you still want to stay in such a Song family? Luaccio looked at Song Ying's eyes and suddenly said softly, so beautiful. Song Ying was startled, and then subconsciously looked at her collar. She bent down too low, and the scenery in front of her chest was visible. She frowned. Pervert. Luaccio shook his head. It's your eyes, and the thing connected to your eyes. Song Ying snorted and stood up. Think about it carefully, whether you are suitable for this world. Behind the riches and honor of this world, there are mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 834. I'll think about it. Luaccio gave such an answer to Song Ying's question. Of course, Song Ying did not expect to get the answer she expected because this guy was too calm. So calm that it was scary. No matter how strong a person was, or how indifferent they were to life and death, or even if they just tried to pretend to be calm, there would always be traces to be found. He did not pity the Caucasian man who cheated, nor was he moved by the man's chopped hand. As for the last scene of him feeding the crocodile, it was more like watching a circus show, the kind that was not very exciting. He was either cold-blooded to the extreme, or he was born with a lack of emotions. Or this kind of thing was a child's play to him. Who are you? Song Ying stared at Luaccio again, trying to catch the slightest change in expression on his face. To you, I am Luaccio. Luaccio thought for a while. To us. Song Ying frowned. Isn't that to us? Who are you? Miss Song, don't worry too much. Luaccio smiled. In fact, I won't be staying for long. Maybe a few days, maybe a week, I'll leave. You're leaving? Song Ying heard an unexpected answer. It depends. If there are more interesting things here, I should stay for a few more days. Luaccio said indifferently. Is that so? Song Ying raised her eyebrows and snorted. Very well. I'll make you feel bored like never before. After that, Song Ying did not say anything else and ignored Luaccio. Accompanied by Otis, she left the independent villa suite in the hotel. She did not arrange any reception for Luaccio and did not even say a word to Luaccio. She treated him as if he was invisible and did not exist. Even so, the hotel staff did not dare to do so. Although Missing seemed to be on bad terms with this Mr. Luo, but she didn't drive this guy away, did she? Who knew if Missing would suddenly say, "You don't have to come to work tomorrow"? Therefore, the general manager of the hotel, Otis, did not dare to neglect this young man. Missing is actually a very nice person. Why don't you go and coax her? We're not in the kind of relationship you think we are. Luaccio smiled and shook his head. Don't worry about me. Mr. Ortiz, you should be busy. I'll be fine by myself. Because Song Ying didn't say anything, Luaccio followed her all the way to a spacious office. The general manager, Otis, looked at Song Ying, who was silently reviewing documents in front of his desk. He could only smile bitterly, then lowered his voice and said, "Well, Mr. Luo, if you need anything, just find someone and let me know. There's a secretary on duty outside the door. You can also tell her. I'll give the order." "Thank you." After Ortiz left, Song Ying suddenly looked up at Luaccio. Luaccio felt her gaze and asked curiously, "What's the matter?" Unexpectedly, Song Ying just stared at Luo intently. After a while, she seemed to have figured something out and started typing on a keyboard with both hands. Luaccio smiled, then raised the temperature of the air conditioner by 2 degrees. He walked quietly to the bookshelf in the office and picked up a book. If you're sleepy, just find a room to sleep in. Song Ying did not look up. She started typing on the keyboard and started writing on the document. The service of this hotel is pretty good. If you have any special needs, you can be satisfied. Although I don't have a good impression of you, you're still a member of the Song family. I can't treat you badly. I'll just read for a while. Luo Chio pointed at the book he had just taken down from the bookshelf. Tea Sutra. Up to you. Song Ying lowered her head and started working again. Do you want me to pour you a glass of water? Luochio looked at the almost empty cup beside Song Ying. Don't disturb me. Song Ying did not look up. Also, turn the air conditioner back to normal. I'm afraid of the heat. Luochio nodded and walked to the wall to adjust the temperature of the air conditioner back to normal. Then, he walked back to the sofa. However, this time, Luochio's footsteps were lighter. Actually, reading ebooks was more convenient and more comprehensive. However, it was not as good as reading a paper book. Luochio was a person who liked to read. It did not take long for him to be immersed in the contents of the Tea Sutra. The minute and second hands on the white wall clock slowly turned. 2:00 in the morning, 2:30, 3:30. Song Ying occasionally looked up and glanced at Luochio, who was reading. Then, she lowered her head and started working again. 4:00 in the morning, 4:38. Song Ying stood up with the document in her hand. She was completely immersed in the world of work. She didn't even feel that there was one more person in the office than usual. She completely ignored the existence of Luochio. Early in the morning, at 6:23 a.m., Song Ying threw down the fountain pen in her hand. Then, she stretched lazily and beat her shoulders. Did he leave? Song Ying looked at the seat where Luochio was sitting. He was no longer there. She didn't even know when he left. Song Ying directly called the secretary outside the office. What about the guy surnamed Luo? Did he find a room to sleep? The secretary said, no, missing. Early in the morning, several gentlemen came and picked up Mr. Luo. Picked up? Who? Song Ying frowned. Mr. Little Song came in person. The secretary quickly said, he has been gone for more than 20 minutes. Well, I see. Song Ying calmed down. It seemed that Luochio didn't come back all night. Even her uncle, Song Haoran, couldn't sit still, so he came in person to pick up Luochio. Song Ying shook her head. She didn't like that her grandpa and uncle treated this guy as a treasure. What else did Mr. Little Song say? Mr. Little Song said that he was going to take someone back to accompany the chairman for breakfast. He said that the chairman hasn't woken up yet. There's still time. Busybody. Song Ying muttered, then shook her head. Bring me something to eat. I'm a little hungry. Soon after, the secretary came in with a plate. There was only a porcelain bowl on the plate, but the thing inside surprised Song Ying, plain porridge. The secretary nodded and said, Miss Ying, you stayed up all night. It's better to eat something light. Song Ying shook her head and said, take it away. I don't want to eat it. It's too light. I don't like things without taste. Have you forgotten? The secretary was a little disappointed and anxious at the same time. She gritted her teeth and said, Miss Ying, you don't have to eat it often. I actually stayed up for a long time. Besides, it's not tasteless. I added ginkgo. Song Ying glanced at the secretary, and the little secretary felt a chill on her back. She suddenly picked up the spoon and took a bite. It was soft and glutinous. Although it was light, the aftertaste of ginkgo spread in her mouth, as if washing away her fatigue in an instant. Song Ying suddenly had a big appetite and ate spoon by spoon. It's not bad. I can eat it. Song Ying nodded. The little secretary was suddenly happy and quickly said, there's more in the kitchen. Miss Ying likes it. I'll add some more for you. Song Ying nodded. The little secretary happily walked out of the office with the bowl, but she suddenly glanced at her seat about an hour and a half ago. Mr. Luo suddenly came out and asked her, do you want Miss Song to praise you and smile at you? But your miss is the kind of person who won't refuse the kindness of others. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 835. In fear, time would become very slow, especially when there was not much support for projects to pass the time. Time would crawl like a snail. The university dormitory was equipped with a TV series. Caroline had repeatedly switched dozens of channels back and forth. Even so, only half an hour had passed. Arnaud was not here. He said that he still needed to go to class. Otherwise, he might not have enough credits to graduate. Caroline found out that Arnaud was studying in 3 different departments at the same time. There were some certificates and awards in the dormitory, all of which belonged to Arnaud personally. This guy's probably a genius, right? Although Caroline didn't know what a real genius should be like, there was no doubt that Arnaud was the smartest person she knew. Well, just in terms of studying. The university campus was very quiet and clean. Young faces were everywhere. Young men and women walked on the campus roads in groups of 3 and 5. Caroline leaned against the window, feeling as if she had entered a zoo called University. She was looking at a world she had never been in contact with. Caroline suddenly thought of Nia. She hadn't heard from Nia for a few days. She didn't know if lawyer Carlo had sold Nia's real estate. Perhaps he had sold it and let the boss of Boston's men get $2 million. She lay in bed, perhaps more hopelessly than ever before, for Carlo was probably gone, for even Caroline herself had disappeared from the last moments of Nia's life at this time. Every time she thought of this, Caroline felt very sad and guilty. Perhaps a real whore should be more ruthless. Caroline thought for a long time and finally found a reason for herself to calm down. She forced herself to avoid thinking about anything related to Nia. Besides, she could not even protect herself now. She kept changing the TV channel because she wanted to see if there was any news about Livia's murder. However, to Caroline's regret, the various TV stations broadcast either non-nutritious programs or all kinds of strange news and current affairs. Caroline suddenly felt a little ridiculous because she understood that for a lowly sex worker like Livia, not many people would pay attention to her even if she died on the street. The police would even be troubled because it increased their workload. Just like that, the death of a life was buried in the ever-changing society. Scum trash. For a moment, Caroline even subconsciously labeled herself as such. Thus, when she looked at the men and women on campus, she suddenly felt that these people were somewhat disgusting. She knew that she was just venting her anger on him. But if she didn't vent her anger, what could a person like her do? Someone like me? Caroline suddenly rushed out of the dormitory recklessly. She remembered Arnold's warning not to leave this place casually. But at this time, she just wanted to find a place to get some fresh air, even if it was just taking a stroll around the dormitory. Of course, she would still take some protective measures. For example, she put on a hoodie and took a pair of glasses from Arnold's desk. She found that the glasses turned out to have no lenses, just a pair of glasses. Caroline didn't think too much about it, because she felt that she was in a mess now. She couldn't figure out what happened when she came in. She gradually walked through the path of the boys' dormitory and came to an artificial lake on campus. Caroline threw a few stones into the artificial lake. She even played a game of throwing stones several times, but in the end, she felt bored. When she looked back, she saw an old man sitting alone on a bench not far away. The old man stared at the artificial lake in a daze. Caroline felt that this old man was obviously not spending a leisurely afternoon. He should have something on his mind. Perhaps time will pass faster if I chat with a stranger. Caroline subconsciously walked toward the old man who was sitting on the bench in a daze. "Can I sit here?" Caroline stepped forward and asked. The old man glanced up, didn't speak, and didn't continue to pay attention. Caroline shrugged and sat directly on the other side of the bench. "What's this?" Caroline noticed a black card next to the old man. The old man didn't reply, but quickly stuffed the card into his pocket. Caroline didn't care much. At this time, she suddenly took out a few pieces of chocolate from her pocket. "Do you want to eat? I heard that if you eat something when you are unhappy, you'll be happier. It seems that chocolate contains some special ingredients or something. Arachidonic acid aminoethanol," the old man said indifferently. Caroline asked curiously, "What is this?" The old man glanced at Caroline and frowned. Arachidonic acid aminoethanol is an endogenous cannabinoid that can combine with the opioid receptors in our brain and then promote the production of dopamine in the brain. Dopamine can make people feel happy and relaxed. This is the campus of the Department of Bioengineering. Are you a student of the Department of Bioengineering? Why don't you know such basic things? Caroline rolled her eyes. "Do you have to be a student just because you are here? Are you also a student here, old man?" Of course, this old man couldn't be a student. This was just Caroline's glib talk. "You don't know me?" The old man glanced at Caroline in surprise. "Are you famous?" Caroline asked back. "I'm not famous," the old man said indifferently, I'm just a bad old man who had to retire and was sent to this place to retire. Retirement. Isn't retirement good? Caroline asked curiously. Haven't you worked hard all your life for retirement? I think you should be quite rich. Isn't it good to enjoy life next? Why are you still sulking here? The old man said, my life is long gone. Caroline saw that the old man had no intention of touching the chocolate she gave out, so she took it back and ate it herself. Suddenly, she said, probably, but it's much better than some people waiting desperately for death in a hospital bed. At least you can sit here in a daze, and others might not be able to see tomorrow's sun. The old man glanced at Caroline in surprise. His intuition told him that this girl had a sense of vicissitudes that ordinary students didn't have. He subconsciously asked, do you have something on your mind too? Caroline kicked her legs and seemed to be in a better mood. She said, old man, you just said also, right? You go first. The old man shook his head. Caroline simply sat up cross-legged and then turned herself to the old man. Don't you think it's just right? I have something to worry about, and you have something to think about. We're both depressed, and it's not that we don't want to know each other. We might not see each other again in the future. So why don't we talk to each other? I heard that if you listen to more of other people's miserable experiences, you'll feel happy. What kind of logic is that? The old man frowned. Caroline shrugged and said, there's no logic, but isn't it all the same? Let's say you've had an unlucky afternoon and you can't feel any worse. But at night, someone tells you that your neighbor died in a car accident. You may feel sad, but don't you also feel lucky? Because someone else is worse off than you. Building your happiness on others. The old man shook his head. Not interested. Caroline shrugged and said, that depends on who the other party is. Maybe the other party is also building happiness on you. Anyway, I'll say it first. Let's each say one thing. We cannot discuss any reasons for this matter, and just simply listen. How about it? Seeing that the old man didn't respond, Caroline thought for a while and said first, I'm currently being chased by a few bad guys. I can't go anywhere now. I can only hide. All the money on me has been taken away by the bad guys. Now I'm basically in a state where I don't have a next meal. Then you should go to the police, the old man said indifferently. Caroline said, didn't we agree not to talk about the matter itself and just listen? Okay, it's your turn, old man. The old man frowned and hesitated for a while before slowly saying, I can still work, but I have a problem at work. This will have a great impact on my son. That's why he fired me from my job and sent me here. If I don't agree, life in a nursing home will be waiting for me. Caroline said, a friend of mine unfortunately died not long ago, and I inexplicably appeared at the scene of the murder. They all treated me as the murderer. The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. Looking at the young girl with a delicate face, his face sank. Caroline was ready to run at this time. Unexpectedly, the old man stared blankly at the lake. I've killed a lot of people. A long time ago, because of my stubbornness, I caused a work accident. Then my colleagues who work with me all died in the accident. This even included one of my favorite students, and she was also my son's wife. No wonder your son treats you badly. Caroline said in astonishment. The old man frowned. Didn't you say not to talk about it? I'm sorry. Caroline shrugged and then looked up into the distance. I lied to someone. Although I don't know if she treats me well or not, she was still willing to give me the last bit of her things. But I still lied to her, deceived her with others, and cheated her of her hope. The old man said, I'm also deceiving my relatives, and deceiving my grandson. I dare not tell him the truth back then, and try my best to maintain this family. But we all know that the longer the deceit, the stronger the pain will be when the truth comes. Caroline was silent. The old man was also silent. After a long time, Caroline suddenly said, I have no future. The old man said slowly, my dream is dead. After a long time, Caroline sighed, stood up, and shook her head. It turns out that I can't be happy at all. The old man also smiled bitterly. Let's go. Caroline shook her head and patted the old man's shoulder casually. It was a very simple, comforting action. However, the moment her palm touched the old man's shoulder, Caroline's brain suddenly exploded, and a strange scene flashed in front of her eyes. A white bed covered with white sheets. It was the old man's appearance. He seemed to be dead in the ward. Beside him, there was a middle-aged man with a complicated expression and a little boy who was crying. You will die," Caroline muttered to herself. She shuddered and woke up. She saw the old man looking up at her in shock. Caroline hurriedly said, "I didn't mean that. I just maybe—" The old man shook his head thoughtfully. "Maybe even I died back then. I mean, in the future." Caroline swallowed her words in the end. The old man also stood up, put on his hat, and turned to leave. Caroline said to his back, "Do you want to go home more?" The old man waved his hand as a farewell with Caroline on his back. After watching the old man leave completely, Caroline went back listlessly. Perhaps she could rush back to the dormitory before Arnaud came back from class. She didn't stop all the way. When she was about to reach the dormitory, she went into the convenience store and bought a bottle of beer. The money was taken from the table in the dormitory. It was just some loose change, probably enough to buy a bottle of beer. When Caroline walked out of the convenience store, she saw Arnaud walking past with his head lowered. Caroline wanted to stop him, but she saw him quickly circling to the back of the convenience store. Caroline frowned. She didn't make a sound, but followed quietly. Arnaud stopped in the alley behind the convenience store, and a few young men were waiting here early. These people should be students of the school. Caroline saw that one of them was carrying a school bag. Arnaud seemed to be particularly cautious. They were talking about something. The student suddenly took out money and handed it to Arnaud. After Arnaud nodded, he took out something from his body and handed it to these students. Caroline opened her mouth and quickly turned her back with a little horror in her eyes. Her face suddenly turned pale. Caroline subconsciously covered her mouth, but her fingers touched the glasses on her face. Caroline took off the glasses abruptly. There were no lenses. Arnaud was nearsighted. But these glasses, this person, is not Arnaud. In the evening, an old man came to the stairs. He was holding a strange black card in his hand, and his face was confused. He seemed to be looking for something, and his eyes kept looking around. This old man looked clean and neat, and his clothes should be of good brands. This attracted some covetous eyes nearby, although there was a rule not to rob locals. In fact, many people really cared about such a rule most of the time. The old man didn't know that two people had been quietly following behind him. His eyes suddenly lit up at this time, and he walked toward a grocery store on the stairs. From the eyes of the two people who wanted to see the robbery, the old man was indeed walking in this direction. Where is he? Wasn't he here just now? Why did he suddenly disappear? Quickly look for Club. The old man looked up at the door of this old shop, and then reached out to push the pine door. The old man was surprised to see such a luxuriously decorated shop in the slums without losing its style. He didn't know where the lights were installed, but the lobby was bright and warm, soft, and not dazzling. "Is there anything I can help you with?" The old man heard the voice and looked over. It was a woman in a black and white maid outfit. She was sitting quietly on a chair in the corner. The old man subconsciously raised the black card in his hand. "It seems it brought me here, but I can't remember when this thing appeared in my hand. Have we seen it somewhere before?" "Excuse me, is there anything I can help you with, Dr. Frankie?" The club maid asked again. Her voice was not loud, but clearly passed into the old man's ears and heart. It seemed to have endless magic. Countless things flashed through the old man's mind. Old man. Dr. Frankie was not surprised that his name was called out in an instant. He just had an impulse in his heart. Chapter 836. Dr. Frankie only felt that the whole world had turned into darkness at this moment. In the darkness, a slender hand that seemed to have no bones was slowly reaching toward him. The sleeve inlaid with lace made it look like the stamen of a dahlia. The hand was still approaching, and then a long and narrow bottle appeared out of thin air. It carried the bottle and continued to reach toward him from afar. A face that was so beautiful that it seemed illusory and slightly pale suddenly appeared from the darkness, as if it had emerged from the depths of the dark sea. Dr. Frankie only felt that he had been completely lost in this pair of dark blue eyes. "I want the future," He suddenly heard this beautiful person whispering something in his ear. Dr. Frankie felt that he couldn't hear it clearly, but he caught the most important information. This was something that could fulfill his wish. Without any hesitation, he took the long and narrow bottle, raised his head, and poured the contents of the bottle into his mouth. The taste wasn't bad. It felt like milk chocolate. "What is this?" Dr. Frankie asked subconsciously after drinking it. At the cost of your potential, it can greatly increase your brain cell activity and make you smarter. Why do I feel like I've seen it somewhere? It's okay. You'll soon forget it. Then you'll occasionally think of it and forget it. Don't worry about it. The price is my soul. The price is your soul. Thank you for your patronage. Miss Maid made a textbook bow toward the back of the old man who left the door. Then she tidied up the empty bottle on the table. Is there a guest here? It was Tae-Yenzi who spoke. Since he became the Lord God of the game world, Tae-Yenzi had become the first black soul envoy in history who didn't need to go out for business because of the long-term and stable source of income. As long as you give me a network cable, I'll seduce even a god. Tae-Yenzi didn't know where he learned this witticism. Recently, in Adam's work log, Tae-Yenzi often came up with this catchphrase. "What's the matter?" Yi asked indifferently. Tae-Yenzi hurriedly ran down the stairs. He didn't care about standing there and talking to Miss Maid. "It's like this, Miss Yi. Recently, our server has been inexplicably lagging, especially after the last update. There are many bugs, and even some players' death count resets. I'm thinking, is there any way to solve it?" Yi said indifferently, "The celestial worthy palace that you privately built takes up too much of the system's memory. Just cut it down." Say. Genzi blinked and hurriedly said, Actually, how could I trouble you, Yi, with such a small problem? I will definitely overcome it. Isn't there a saying that goes, if there's a condition, you have to do it. If there's no condition, I can also do it. I'll definitely do it well." "Oh." Yi narrowed her eyes. Genzi lowered his head and said, "I will immediately reduce the celestial sovereign palace. Okay." Miss Maid nodded and said, "I'll set up an additional server for you in 2 days. The number of players has almost reached the original upper limit. You won't be able to hold on for long, no matter how much you reduce it. You've done a good job in attracting players." Tae-Yenzi flattered. "This is also because of Master and Miss Yi. I'm just basking in the glory." "How's the soul that Master recently put in?" Yi suddenly asked. Tae-Yenzi opened his eyes and said without blushing, "It's pretty good. However, he insisted on reincarnating into a slime. I can't do anything about it. However, I have tried my best to put this soul in an environment that is easy to grow. Now, it's already a level 15 mini-boss." "Is that so?" Yi nodded and said with a faint smile, "That's good. However, since you want to play the role of the Demon King, it's not that useful if you don't grow up in a cruel environment." "That's what I think too." Tae-Yenzi agreed. "Continue to work hard." Yi looked at Tae-Yenzi with a smile. "Don't disappoint Master's expectations of you." Tae-Yenzi immediately straightened his back, said goodbye, and went back upstairs happily. Seeing Tae-Yenzi disappear in the corridor upstairs, the servant girl smiled faintly. "If I can defeat the Demon King, the next step should be to defeat the God King." Miss Maid narrowed her eyes. "I have to plan carefully." After thinking for a while, Miss Maid sat down. She pointed at the table in front of her, and a recipe suddenly appeared out of thin air. She began to flip through it. But not long after, Miss Maid frowned slightly and suddenly waved her hand. On the floor of the hall, a black light appeared. Then it turned into lines and finally formed a circle. In the circle, something was floating slowly. It was a black cabinet with a height of about 3 meters. This black cabinet looked like a huge safe. Miss Maid pressed her palm in the center of the black cabinet. Neatly net-like cracks began to appear in front of the cabinet, and then it shrank little by little and finally opened. In the cabinet, there were many black crystal spheres, and each sphere's base was marked with a corresponding number. At this time, among the many black spheres, there was a sphere emitting a weak fire from the internal force, and the number marked under its base was 17. On the 17th, is he going to wake up? Much earlier than expected. Yi muttered, "It's time to inform Master." I believe you'll handle it well. I hope I can see your excellence when I come back. Miss Maid was startled, and then she gave up this idea. I can't disturb Master's vacation. Arnaud suddenly stopped in front of the door of the dormitory. He looked around the corridor, then suddenly squatted down in front of the door and picked up a soft black thread under the crack of the door. Arnaud frowned, stood up, put the black thread into his pocket, and slowly opened the door. He saw Caroline watching TV in boredom at this time. Caroline heard the sound of the door opening and turned her head at the same time. "You're back." "Yes." Arnaud nodded, then glanced at the shoe cabinet next to him, and suddenly asked, "Have you been out?" Caroline raised the beer bottle in her hand and said, "I bought this," and suddenly felt like drinking. "Really? When?" Arnaud asked casually. Caroline thought for a while, then looked at the time, shook her head, and said, "More than an hour ago. I forgot the exact time." "You didn't see anyone, right?" Arnaud took 2 steps forward. "Yes." Caroline smiled. "I saw something very interesting." "What is it?" Arnaud casually sat down next to Caroline, less than 5 centimeters away. At this time, Caroline hooked her finger at Arnaud with a mysterious look. Arnaud approached again, only to hear Caroline whisper, "I found a secret." Arnaud's eyes shrank imperceptibly, but his palm slowly reached into his pocket and grabbed a bunch of keys. His fingers clamped the keys like the sharp claws of a beast. Arnaud whispered, "Secret." Caroline said even more mysteriously, "I found. Arnaud didn't blink. Caroline suddenly said wittily, "The guy in the opposite room is actually a homosexual." "Homosexual?" Arnaud was stunned. Caroline nodded, then casually took a sip of beer and continued to watch TV. "Yeah, I saw him kissing another guy in the corridor, and the other person was the administrator downstairs in your dormitory. Oh my God, I almost vomited." "Huh? Is that so?" Arnaud slowly pulled his hand out of his pocket and smiled. "That's terrible. But you'd better not go out carelessly. It's too dangerous." Caroline nodded. "It's okay. I'm just going downstairs to buy something. I won't go far. And you said that even if Boston's people find us here, they won't dare to do anything." Arnaud stood up and said helplessly, "That's right. I know you're bored, but it's better to be careful. By the way, are you hungry? I brought you something to eat." "Is it bread again?" Caroline lowered her head. Arnaud smiled and said, "This is cooked food from the school cafeteria. Let me heat it for you." A 2-person dormitory was equipped with cooking tools. It should be the students' own configuration. Seeing Arnaud walking toward the microwave, Caroline slowly breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at Arnaud's back, who was fiddling with the food, and suddenly looked at her palm. She remembered the scene when she touched the old man's shoulder in the afternoon. Caroline stood up abruptly and walked toward Arnaud. Then she hesitated for a moment before patting Arnaud's shoulder gently. "What's wrong?" Arnaud turned around in confusion. Caroline showed a stunned expression. Nothing happened, but she had to explain her actions, so she said, "Nothing, just a little something. I've already swatted it away." "Thank you." Arnaud smiled and then asked, "By the way, do you like spicy sauce?" Caroline secretly gritted her teeth and then made a rather crazy decision. She suddenly leaned on Arnaud's chest and kissed his lips. Arnaud's breathing suddenly became heavy. "Just treat it as rent." Caroline kissed Arnaud's ear and said in a passionate tone, "In any case, this was a hot body full of youthful vitality." Arnaud had the most primitive male reaction in an instant. His originally stiff body quickly relaxed, and his hands slowly placed behind Caroline's waist. Leaning against the cupboard, the two began to kiss. Arnaud's breathing began to become heavier and heavier, and he began to reach out to untie Caroline's clothes. Caroline's reaction became more and more intense. She suddenly pulled up Arnaud's clothes, then bent down to kiss Arnaud's abdomen. Her hands reached into Arnaud's clothes at the same time and began to stroke his chest. Little by little, Caroline rolled up Arnaud's clothes, and the kiss gradually went up. He let out a comfortable groan. Caroline paid attention to Arnaud's expression. When the clothes were completely pushed up to Arnaud's shoulders, Caroline suddenly stopped and stared at Arnaud's chest. There was nothing here except for a lot of chest hair. What's wrong?" Arnaud breathed heavily and looked at Caroline impatiently. Caroline said helplessly at this time, "There doesn't seem to be a condom, right?" Arnaud was taken aback, then swallowed his saliva and gritted his teeth. "Wait a minute. I'll buy it soon." He seemed a little flustered and anxious. He hurriedly opened the door and said quickly, "5 minutes." Caroline made a seductive gesture. "Hurry up." Click, the sound of the door closing. Caroline quietly opened it again. Seeing that Arnaud had already walked quickly to the corridor, she quickly closed the door again and locked it. She stretched out her hand at this time, and there was a bunch of keys in her palm. Caroline held the keys in her hand and walked quickly in the room. Suddenly, Caroline walked to the desk and began to test the keys in the hero's hand one by one. Click, she opened the first drawer, but other than some certificates, she couldn't find anything. Caroline frowned and began to open the next drawer. One by one, the 3 drawers of the desk had been opened. Caroline had rummaged through everything inside, but she couldn't find anything, let alone what she hoped to find. Caroline sat down in disappointment and began to reorganize her thoughts. If this Arnaud wasn't the real Arnaud, then there was only one possibility. He was Haley. The real Arnaud was probably still in the hands of Boss Boston. In the convenience store, Caroline saw this Arnaud peddling things to the students. It was very likely that it was the batch of goods that he had swallowed from Boss Boston. This guy probably stole Arnold's identity and pretended to be a student here to make it easier for him to move around. Caroline hoped to find something useful to her. Perhaps this Arnaud hadn't had time to digest her stolen bank card and was still hiding it. Of course, this possibility was very small, and Caroline didn't have much hope. But she couldn't find anything useful in this drawer. Caroline looked out of the window in disappointment and saw that Arnaud had hurried back to the dormitory. Caroline suddenly panicked. She quickly tidied up the things she had messed up, wiped her face, and hurriedly looked for anything she had missed. At this time, there was a knock on the door. Key. The key to the door was also in this bunch of keys. Arnaud didn't have the key to the door. Caroline. Caroline. The heavier the knocking on the door, the clearer the voice calling her name. Caroline's heart beat rapidly, and the heart rate index rose sharply. A white fog-like light suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. When the light faded, Caroline saw some strange scenes. She saw 2 men fighting. One of them was Arnaud. No, it was Haley. The other was on his back, so Caroline couldn't see clearly. At this time, Arnaud was being ridden by the other party and was being beaten by the other party with his fists. It seemed to be in the suburbs, surrounded by woods, and it should be at night. All of a sudden, the guy whom you couldn't see clearly pulled out a dagger and ruthlessly stabbed it into Arnold's chest. Arnaud widened his eyes and grabbed the other party's arm tightly until he finally stopped moving and his arm fell to the ground weakly. Caroline. Caroline. The knocking on the door became more and more forceful. Caroline. Arnaud frowned deeper. He took 2 steps back, as if he was going to break open the door. However, at this time, the door opened. Caroline was only wrapped in a bath towel. She asked in surprise, "What's wrong?" "You." Arnaud was stunned, then said, "It's nothing. I saw that you didn't respond for a long time, so I was a little worried." Caroline looked at Arnaud suspiciously and said in confusion, "I was going to take a shower first. I had just taken off my clothes when I heard you knocking on the door. Don't you have a key?" Arnaud said, "My key seems to be missing. Did you see it?" Caroline shook her head. "I didn't see it." As she spoke, she suddenly looked at the floor at the door at the corner of the shoe cabinet and squatted down. "Isn't it here? Maybe it's because I left in a hurry just now." Caroline showed a mocking expression. After she teased Arnaud, this man was indeed very unbearable. Arnaud seemed to be a little embarrassed. He swallowed his saliva and slowly walked in front of Caroline. He grabbed her arms with both hands and was about to kiss her. "It's good that you're okay." At this time, Caroline dodged back. "Unfortunately, I can't today." Under Arnaud's puzzled gaze, Caroline walked to the bathroom. After a while, she came out with a pair of small underwear. There was a red patch on it. Caroline said helplessly, "It's not the right time. Maybe, let's wait a little longer." With that said, Caroline elegantly closed the bathroom door. Arnaud was stunned. He only felt that his lower body was getting more and more uncomfortable because of the pants. He sighed and sat down gloomily. All of a sudden, Anuo seemed to have thought of something. He hurriedly walked to the desk and opened the first drawer. After taking a look at the things inside, he reached into the drawer again. After feeling around for a while, he withdrew his hand and locked the drawer again. He looked at the bathroom door thoughtfully. Chapter 837. What's the matter? Arnold was startled. Caroline sat down and said sternly, "Do you remember that I mentioned to you that a bank card was stolen on the day of Livia's death?" Arnold nodded and sat down as well. Caroline said, "Actually, that card was temporarily given to me by someone else for safekeeping. The other party said that the money in it was a little troublesome and couldn't be casually moved. I don't know the specific reason, but that guy said that once the money was moved, it was very likely that the police would find it." Arnold frowned and said coldly, "You mean that's black money?" Caroline shook her head. "I said I don't know. I just helped someone keep it. After it was done, that person said that he would give me a generous reward." Caroline glanced at Arnold and said, "There was a password written on that card." I couldn't help but quietly take a look. The number inside was a little scary. Arnold suddenly said, "How much is there?" Caroline showed a hint of vigilance. "The key is not how much money there is, but I think Haley will definitely withdraw the money, because he doesn't know that the money inside can't be moved." This, Arnold thought seriously for a while. How can you be sure that the money can't be moved? Besides, why would that person let you keep such a large sum of money and write the password on the card? Caroline smiled bitterly. "Otherwise, how do you think an ordinary person like me can get such a large sum of money? If I had this ability, why would I be like this now, hiding here and there, afraid of a boss Boston? Moreover, I don't know why he wrote the password on the card, just as I don't know why he chose me to keep it for him. However, I always feel that that person is not an ordinary person. Originally, a person with such a large sum of money dares to find an unrelated person like me to keep it. He must have some confidence, right?" Arnold was silent for a long time before suddenly asking, "Is this mysterious person really so dangerous?" Caroline nodded seriously and thought. On the same night, Boss Neymar of our slums was assassinated. At the same time, the confidant of a powerful boss next door also died. Because of this, the two big gangs fought like crazy. Speaking of which, Levy Adam planned to run out and hide for a few days because the situation at home was too messy. She inadvertently glanced at Arnold and then smiled bitterly. "But I'm afraid she'll never know that the outside world is even more dangerous." "My condolences." Arnold comforted him, and then he asked cautiously, "So, do you think that the money is related to the fight between the two big gangs?" Caroline shook her head. "How would I know so much? I'm just a very ordinary person, but I think there might be a connection, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened on the same night. But actually, this is also good. At that time, I was blinded by greed and accepted this job. Now that I think about it, I was too impulsive. That money isn't something a person like me can afford. Now that Haley has stolen it, it's fine. He can be blamed for everything. That guy actually killed Livia. I guess that's a form of retribution." Caroline sighed, then looked at Arnold and suddenly said, "I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. After all, Haley is your—" Arnold looked a little unnatural. Then he shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter. We don't have feelings for each other anymore. Whether he lives or dies has nothing to do with me." The topic suddenly fell into silence. No one knew what Arnold was thinking. Caroline saw this and suddenly said, "Then, do you want me to help you?" Arnold was taken aback and looked at Caroline doubtfully. Caroline clenched her fists and then swung them up and down a few times. She bit her lip and said, "I'm sorry. I only know how to comfort men. I feel that you should be quite upset." "No, no need." Arnold suddenly stood up from the sofa. I want to go outside for a walk. Just a walk will do. If there's nothing else, it's best not to go out." Caroline nodded to show that she knew. Arnold quickly put on his clothes and then left the dormitory. After waiting for a while, Caroline hurriedly put on a loose coat and quietly followed him out. She had lost everything. Not only that bank card, but even her savings had been confiscated by Boss Boston. All of this was because of the guy named Haley. She didn't know whether this Arnold was Haley or not, but perhaps she would find a clue on this trip. People die for wealth. After a day of work, Mr. Orphy returned home earlier than usual tonight. When he returned home, he saw his servant, Barbara, hurriedly walking up to him with a worried expression. "What happened?" Mr. Orphy asked with a frown. Barbara shook her head. "Sir, I don't know what to say. Why don't you go take a look yourself? Mr. Frankie seems a little abnormal today." Mr. Orphy was startled and frowned again. "Where is he?" Barbara hurriedly said, "He's in the workshop in the backyard." Mr. Orphy directly threw his briefcase on the sofa and walked with Barbara to the workshop in the backyard. Although it was called a workshop, it was actually just a small wooden house used to store sundries and some hardware that could be used at home. When Mr. Orphy and Barbara arrived, they saw Dr. Frankie lying on the ground. He was holding a piece of chalk in his hand and writing something quickly on the floor. A series of complicated formulas made up of various symbols and equations. Not only on the floor, but also on the walls, the table, and anywhere else that could be seen had been filled with various formulas. Dr. Frankie seemed to have fallen into a state of madness. The ground was densely covered with discarded chalk. "How long has he been like this?" Mr. Orphy's frown deepened. "It's been a long time," Barbara said. "Mr. Frankie came back last night and directly walked here. I didn't pay attention to it at that time. Only when I made dinner and I was about to call him did I discover this. And no matter how much I called him, he ignored me." At this time, Mr. Orphy directly walked behind Dr. Frankie. When he was about to speak, Dr. Frankie suddenly stood up. "Harry, how many times have I told you that the amount of propellant and the engine parameters of a rocket can't be calculated with the Tsiolkovsky formula alone? That formula is outdated." Mr. Orphy was startled by Dr. Frankie's roar. His face slightly changed as he saw Dr. Frankie talking to an old brown bear plushie on the table. Mr. Orphy didn't know what happened to Dr. Frankie at this time, but in his opinion, Dr. Frankie was completely talking to himself. "This is Harry." Barbara came over at this time, pointed to the brown bear plushie, and then pointed to a shabby crystal tube TV not far away. "This is Bovev." Under Mr. Orphy's incredulous gaze, Barbara helplessly pointed to the rest of the things in the workshop one by one, such as hammers, electric drills, fishing rods, and so on, and named them one by one. Finally, Barbara picked up a dead football on the ground and said with a wry smile, "This is you, Mr. Orphy. The doctor said that you were in the way of his work, so he he kicked the ball away." Every time Mr. Orphy heard Barbara say his name, his face would become ugly. At this moment, Barbara wanted to say something, but hesitated. In the end, she stopped Mr. Orphy. After that, she hesitantly circled her head with her finger and asked, "Sir, is there something wrong with Dr. Frankie? These guys are all from back then." Mr. Orphy suddenly quivered. He pulled Dr. Frankie's shoulder heavily, and then seriously stared into Dr. Frankie's eyes. But he saw Dr. Frankie muttering to himself as if he didn't feel anything. High-energy propellant, a propellant with a higher thrust ratio and more effective. The structure of the primary and secondary rockets should be lighter, so it should be lighter. Almost, old man. Mr. Orphy shook Dr. Frankie's shoulder hard. "Can you hear me? Wake up." "It still won't work. It still won't work. Maggie, help me do another simulation. I seem to have thought of a new breakthrough point. Maggie is already dead." Mr. Orphy suddenly roared. Dr. Frankie was suddenly startled and then looked at Mr. Orphy in confusion. He frowned and said, "Who are you? Why are you in my laboratory? Don't disturb my work. The next experiment will begin in half a year. Get out of here. Don't get in my way." Dr. Frankie shook off Mr. Orphy's hands and then took the chalk in his hand, turned around, and rubbed a pile of formulas on the table, and then continued writing. Mr. Orphy was angry and directly reached out to grab Dr. Frankie's arm, snatching the chalk in his hand, and said angrily, "What are you doing?" I said, "Maggie is already dead. You're the one who killed her." Dr. Frankie also screamed and even pushed Mr. Orphy away. Guard! Throw him out for me. Guard!" Dr. Frankie madly grabbed all kinds of tools on the table and threw them at Mr. Orphy. Scissors, hammers, glue. Seeing this, Barbara hurriedly pulled Mr. Orphy out of the workshop. "Sir, I think we shouldn't provoke Dr. Frankie. He's not in a good state now. He's crazy," Mr. Orphy scolded. "He doesn't even recognize me." After Mr. Orphy and Barbara left the workshop, Dr. Frankie regained his composure and began to draw on the ground again. Seeing this, Mr. Orphy angrily closed the door of the workshop and then said angrily, "Lock it. If you don't give him food, I'll see how long he can pretend to be crazy." Mr. Orphy turned around and left. Barbara helplessly glanced at the window, but Dr. Frankie seemed to be fine. Barbara sighed. She more or less knew about this family. Was this Dr. Frankie's counterattack to Mr. Orphy's tough resignation from his scientific research institute? Song Tianyu hadn't slept so late for a long time. When it was almost 10 o'clock in the morning, he got out of bed. While full of energy, he also felt a sense of fulfillment. There was nothing happier than fulfilling a long-cherished wish of many years. "Master, you're awake." Fifth uncle had already brought the servants to Song Tianyu with towels and other things for washing up. Song Tianyu was not in a hurry to wash up, but asked, "Where's Luochio? Has he woken up? Was everything okay last night? It's my fault. I went to bed too early." "Nothing special." Fifth uncle smiled and said, "Master Chio was also tired after a day, so he fell asleep early. But he's awake now, and he's with Master, saying that he's going to buy you something to eat." Song Tianyu smiled and said, "What do you want to eat? You could just ask fourth uncle to make it. Do you need to go out and buy it personally?" Fifth uncle said, "Master said that he wanted to eat soy milk and fried dough sticks, so he went to Zhonghua Street to buy it. He should be back soon." Song Tianyu was gratified and said, "These two children are so considerate. Fifth uncle, help me up." Fifth uncle quickly helped Song Tianyu up. "Master, be careful." Suddenly, a man walked quickly to the door of the room and said respectfully, "Master, it's your satellite phone. It's from Hua Nation." "China?" Song Tianyu frowned and quickly said, "Put it through." Fifth uncle waved his hand at this time, and all the servants left the room in an orderly manner. And fifth uncle took the phone and handed it to Song Tianyu, then left the room and closed the door. Song Tianyu then said seriously, "I'm Song Tianyu. Song family's kid, it's me." Song Tianyu hurriedly sat up straight, and his attitude became humble. "Sisterly, it's so late. What's the matter?" It was a call from Hua Nation in the middle of the night. It was from old Madame Zhang Lilanfang of the Zhang family. "Song family's kid, I found some information about the person you asked me to investigate. I guess you'll be very interested in it." "Go ahead." Song Tianyu frowned. "I'm afraid that the Song family's kid was killed secretly." In front of the desk, Zhang Lilanfang looked at some materials in front of her. "Here are some documents. Let me tell you, these were sent by Shi Shiji and have been sorted out." Zhang Lilanfang didn't hide anything. She calmly told him what she had heard. "That's it. My men are still investigating those who were on the scene that year. I hope I can give you more information as soon as possible." "Song family's kid, are you listening to me?" Song Tianyu kept silent for a while, then said slowly, "Sisterly, can I trouble you for one more thing?" "Go ahead, what is it?" "I want to go back." Zhang Lilanfang frowned. "How many people?" Song Tianyu said in a low voice, 300. "Too many." "It's not too many." Song Tianyu said in a low voice, "I know it's a bit difficult, but if you think it's too troublesome, Tianyu will think of other ways. You're going to bring a bloody storm." "Song family's kid." Zhang Lilanfang sighed. "I'll think of other ways, but I can only do it in batches. I hope you won't go too far." "I can't thank you enough, but I have a condition." "Go ahead." "I've received a job recently, and I need professional help." "Song family's kid, I need your 300 people. How about lending them to me?" Chapter 838. Not long after, fifth uncle heard Song Tianyu's call. He pushed the door open and came in again. Then, he ordered the servants to bring up the toiletries. Song Tianyu muttered to himself for a while before saying, "Old 5, tell the villagers not to take on any business in the near future. Those who have business on hand should finish it as soon as possible and come back. Prepare 300 people and equipment for me." Fifth uncle didn't ask why. He said that he would take care of this matter as soon as possible. Song Tianyu took the hot towel from the servant. After touching his face, he suddenly asked, "Where's Song Ying?" Fifth uncle said, "Missing went out early in the morning. She said that she went back to the hotel to deal with something." Song Tianyu shook his head. "It's hard on this child. She has to take care of business for our Song family at such a young age. This should be Howren's job. It's a pity that Howren's temper is too wild." Everyone knew that Song Howren didn't like to sit in the office. Instead, he liked to run around. So much so that when he was free, he liked to form a team and go everywhere to explore. It's good for the young master to have more experience. Fifth uncle smiled slightly. Song Tianyu shook his head and waved his hand. Fifth uncle understood and let the servants leave. Song Tianyu looked at fifth uncle and said, "Old five, do you think Luochio and Songing are possible?" Fifth uncle had an expression that said, "As expected." After all, the Song family was a family with a long history. They had huge assets and power. However, in this generation, they encountered the awkward situation of being few in number. Song Howren seemed to have no interest in love. He had been single for so many years. Father Song watched himself grow older year by year. Naturally, he was secretly anxious. Originally, he had been looking for candidates for Song Ying. However, he hadn't found anyone to his liking. "Master, it seems that you really like Master Chiu." Fifth uncle smiled and said, "You've considered this so quickly. Putting aside the fact that he's a member of the Song family, this child is the one that I'm most satisfied with among my peers." Song Tianyu stood up, walked to the window, and pulled open the curtains. Not arrogant, not rash and calm. Rare. But fifth uncle said, "But master, have you ever thought that the more Master Chiu acts like this, the more unreasonable he is?" "Oh, tell me." Song Tianyu turned around. "Ordinary people," fifth uncle said slowly. "Even if he was born in a wealthy family, it's impossible for him to be so calm after seeing the tip of the iceberg of the Song family. Old master, old fifth is saying something unpleasant here. This Master Chiu might not be as simple as he seems." Song Tianyu frowned and glanced at fifth uncle. Fifth uncle said, "He's very natural. He's very natural to me and the servants at home." This was a habit that only people who were used to being served would develop. He's not surprised by anything. He's humble and neither servile nor overbearing. This kind of person, what about this kind of person? Song Tianyu asked. Fifth uncle said seriously, "Old master, this Master Chiu is more like a master. I've been working as a housekeeper all my life. I'm used to serving people, so I can feel this." Song Tianyu nodded. "But his family background is very ordinary. I've already asked people to investigate. There's no problem with his identity. And the verification was done by Howren himself. There won't be any mistakes." Fifth uncle frowned. "Then I'm afraid this Master Chiu is another kind of person. He's a born noble." Fifth uncle shook his head. "But we know that no matter how noble a person's identity is, if they grow up in an ordinary environment, they'll end up like ordinary people. On the other hand, if an ordinary person grows up in an upper-class environment, they'll be tainted with a noble temperament." Old Fifth, Song Tianyu walked over and patted Fifth uncle's shoulder. "I know you're careful, but my view is somewhat different from yours. I don't think he's a born noble, but a born virtuous person." Song Tianyu looked at the beautiful manor outside the window and said thoughtfully, "A virtuous person is only good at Tao. If he's not virtuous, he'll be useless." "This is too," Song Tianyu added. "I'll think about Song Ying's matter again. Don't worry too much. I think we should let these two children stay together for a while. Oh, I'm back. I'm hungry too." The car slowly drove into the manor. It was Song Howren's car, a very ordinary Jeep. In fact, it wasn't breakfast. After they finished the simple soy milk and youtiao, it was almost 11 o'clock. Song Tianyu personally brewed a pot of tea in the hall. After they shared it, Song Tianyu suddenly said, "Luochio, I plan to go back to China in the near future. You should come back with me." "Go back to China?" Luochio looked at Song Tianyu. Song Tianyu smiled and said, "Our Song family's old grave hasn't been taken care of for many years. Although you visited the morning hall, it doesn't count." You have to personally go to the Song family's old grave. This year, we'll be celebrating the Lunar New Year in China. Anyway, there are only a few days left. You can stay here and come back with me. Luocio thought for a while. He temporarily transferred the authority of the club to Yu Yi. It was a disguised form of vacation for him. Because of his vacation, when Song Ying's subordinates killed the Caucasian man last night, he was exempted from business. However, compared to the Black Soul Messenger's vacation, the cost of the boss's vacation was much higher. Basically, the boss was consuming his lifespan every moment. Although he could earn it back, the unit of consumption was also calculated in years. Because of the God King project, Luocio had this vacation. Intuition told him that there might be other reasons for Song Tianyu's return. More importantly, the emotions that had been suppressed all this time seemed to have begun to recover. For example, he cried for the Buddha jumps over the wall that was passed down in the Song family. However, Luocio also knew that in this mode, even if he temporarily enriched his emotions, it wouldn't be a long-term solution. The consumption was too great. Even with the support of the God King project, there would always be a situation where he couldn't sustain himself. In the end, in order to maintain his emotional enrichment, he might crazily develop more trading methods to obtain more sacrificial items to increase his lifespan. Then, he might unknowingly walk the path of his predecessor. I really can't relax for a moment. Luocio's thoughts flashed in his mind. He looked at Song Tianyu and said, "Okay." Song Tianyu said again, "By the way, I heard that your father later married his second wife. When you go back, bring her for me to see. After all, she is the daughter-in-law of the Song family. She should kowtow to her ancestors. This woman is good. These years, she didn't leave you. Our Song family can't treat her badly." Luocio just smiled and didn't give a definite answer. Song Tianyu thought for a while and said, "Haoran, go back to the village in the afternoon. I have something for you to do. Lao will tell you the details later." Song Haoran shrugged and then made a gesture of goodbye to Luocio. He was very free and easy. Song Tianyu suddenly clapped his hands. Then, a woman in her early 20s suddenly walked in from outside. Song Tianyu pointed at the woman and said, "Gan Hong, you will follow Master Chiu in the future and take care of his daily life." Luocio took a look. This girl was the attendant on the train. He looked at Song Tianyu and said in surprise, "In the future?" Song Tianyu said indifferently, "She will be yours in the future." Buggy swallowed his saliva. In fact, his lips had long been in a dry and pale state. But there was no other way, because he had been exposed to the wind and sun on the rooftop. He had almost reached the limit of the human body. He lay on the ground without any strength. That night, after the club's servant girl threw him on the rooftop, he was completely abandoned. He tried to smash the iron door of the rooftop, but it was impossible to tear down the building with his bare hands. Buggy untied his belt weakly. It was the last way. He planned to gnaw off this belt. It was so hard. "What are you doing?" As if he had heard the gospel, Bucky suddenly burst out with a brand new strength and climbed up. He had finally met the Miss Servant Girl of the club. Seeing Buggy was so excited that he wanted to come over and hug her. Yi frowned and flicked her finger. Buggy rolled back the way he came and finally stopped after hitting the top of the guardrail. "I say, you guys are too unkind. You threw me in this place, and I almost died." Buggy roared indignantly. Yi walked to Buggy expressionlessly. "You are in good spirits. It seems that you can hold on a little longer." Buggy's face suddenly changed dramatically, and he begged for mercy. "I was wrong. Please don't leave me here again." Yi smiled slightly. "I said you were in good spirits, which means your spiritual power is good and has improved a lot. Now you should be able to hold on 4 or 5 times with the ability of the ring." Buggy was stunned. Yi said indifferently, "There's a kind of cultivator in the Vatican. Their holy power is particularly strong because they persist in hard practice for many years. You don't eat or drink, and your body reaches the limit, which is a great training for your will. You have been too comfortable in prison these years, so you have to suffer more. When you have nothing to do in the future, limit yourself. Whether it is pain, hunger, or cold, is a good way to exercise." "I don't know whether I should say it or not." But the servant girl waved her hand, and a delicate plate suddenly fell in front of Buggy. Buggy subconsciously took it and found that there was a plate of fragrant barbecue in it. Buggy wolfed it down without saying a word, and then said ecstatically, "Damn, it's delicious. Even a 3-star Michelin chef can't compare with it. Miss, did you specially make this for me? What kind of meat is this? It's really delicious. And after eating it, I feel a force coming out. Hurry up and finish eating and come with me. Someone is waiting for you," Yi said directly. "Who? Your believer." The servant girl suddenly narrowed her eyes. "Eat it clean. If there is any residue, you will always be hungry in the future." Buggy licked the plate crazily, not letting go of even a little bit of juice. Caroline didn't dare to follow too close and only dared to look at Arnold from afar. Even so, she still had to spend a lot of effort to barely keep up with the other party's footsteps. Arnold walked too fast and seemed to be unusually careful, stopping frequently to pay attention to the movements around. Soon after, Arnold walked into a teaching building. At night, there were no students in the teaching building, and the corridor was even quieter. It was easy to hear the sound of footsteps. When Caroline was hesitating whether to follow again, she saw someone sneaking in at this time. Caroline quickly hid. The back of the guy who came later was a little familiar. Caroline felt as if she had seen this guy somewhere before. She still mustered up the courage to follow. Arnold entered a classroom early in the morning and closed the curtains. Not long after, the person who came later also entered the classroom. Caroline vaguely heard some voices. The curtains weren't all closed, leaving a small gap in one place. Caroline stuck close to it. Through the glass, she could only see Arnold's appearance. Because of the angle, she could only see the other man's outstretched arms. The guy who came later put a leather bag on the table, then opened it, took out some small bags, and handed them to Arnold. Arnold frowned and said something to the other party. Caroline could see that Arnold was full of anger at this time, but he didn't seem to dare to resist. The man who came later directly grabbed Arnold's hand and stuffed the thing into his hand. In the end, he even gave Arnold a push. Arnold was pushed directly to the ground. The man walked over a little, and Caroline could finally see the man's side profile. It was Big Cousin. Caroline didn't recognize him wrongly. This was one of Boss Boston's men. He took her out to withdraw money, and when she met Carlo later, he pretended to be her big cousin. At this moment, the eldest cousin pointed at Anua, as if he was saying something to warn him. Caroline subconsciously covered her mouth, afraid that she would make any sound. Boss Boston's men had been in contact with Arnold for a long time. They seemed to be forcing him to do something he didn't want to do. Could it be that this Arnold was indeed the real Arnold? Was it because he could help Boss Boston sell drugs at school, so Boss Boston let him go? Did he take the initiative, or did Boss Boston threaten him? Did he tell Boss Boston that I'm here? Countless questions. Caroline retreated in horror. I can't stay here anymore, and I can't go back to the dormitory. I have to leave this place now. Suddenly, Caroline bumped into something. It was a person, a guy whose appearance couldn't be seen clearly. Caroline didn't know when this person appeared behind her, and she didn't know if this person was accompanying her big cousin. Before she could make a sound, she was strangled by the man. At the same time, her mouth and nose were covered with a handkerchief. In an instant, Caroline fell softly to the ground. Remember to do your job well. Trash. Big Cousin opened the door of the classroom. Before leaving, he yelled at the inside and left in a hurry. Before leaving, Big Cousin looked at the corridor in confusion, but he didn't find anything, so he left quickly. Chapter 839. In contrast to the shabby houses in the slums, there were many luxurious houses for the rich. Mr. Besson was a member of the rich circle. However, he had many friends. In the past, Mr. Besson often held swimming parties in his house. Because of his extravagance, Mr. Besson had more and more friends. Tonight, there was another party in Mr. Besson's villa. However, this party was completely different from the swimsuit parties in the past. All the windows in the hall were closed, and the curtains were drawn. They didn't turn on the lights, but everyone was holding 3-pronged candlesticks. Under the light of the candles, there was enough light in the hall. including Mr. Besson. There were 11 people in the party. They were wearing long black robes, and their faces were covered by their hoods. They stood in a circle, as if they were performing some mysterious ritual. Then what? Someone in the crowd asked in confusion. Well, Mr. Besson hesitated for a long time. Then he frowned and said, "Maybe we should wait and see." "Forget it." A woman let out an impatient voice. Then she lifted the hood of her dress and quickly removed the black robe on her body. Of course, after taking off her black robe, the woman was wearing a strapless dress. The woman said in frustration, "I don't want to torture myself in such a hot day, and I don't want to turn on the air conditioner and wear such a thick robe." Mr. Besson also took off his hood and said, "This is the only way to let the all-knowing God Baki notice our sincerity." The woman said helplessly, "My dear Mr. Besson, haven't we tried almost all the methods we can think of? Are you going to hold an evil ceremony like a cult in a novel? Or do you want to sacrifice a newborn baby?" Mr. Besson frowned and didn't say anything. It seemed that he was thinking about something. When the people saw Mr. Besson's face, they couldn't help but feel that it was ridiculous. Mr. Besson looked like he was really interested in the idea. In fact, everyone gathered here had witnessed a miracle with their own eyes not long ago. They saw the mysterious man who claimed to be the apostle of God Baki save Mr. Besson's life. They even saw the apostle fly away. They even thought of the voice that appeared during the hostage situation at the theater that day. They believed that the mysterious voice and the mysterious man who saved Besson were miracles performed by the great God of omniscience, Baki. Because of the miracle of life and the extraordinary power that broke through the void, a strange thought suddenly appeared in the heads of a group of rich people who were bored out of their minds. The omniscient and omnipotent Baki God did not appear in any contemporary belief system. It might be a newly born God, or it might have existed since ancient times, but it was not recorded in history. No matter what, there was no trace of this omniscient and omnipotent God in the world. Could they develop a group to support the great all-knowing God and become the first batch of believers of the all-knowing God? It was the miracle of life. These very rich fellows seemed to have beheld a radiance far more dazzling than the light of money. Hence, at the instigation of M. Besson, who was almost in a frenzy, this meeting took place. Besson, maybe God Baki is just passing by and doesn't care about the beliefs of the people. Besson's old friend patted him on the shoulder. But a strange belief had been ignited in Mr. Besson's heart. He said excitedly, "No, it must be because I'm not pious enough. When I was shot and my life was in danger, I felt the insignificance of life. I have a lot of unfinished business, and I'm very eager to do it. It was the omniscient and omnipotent God Baki who gave me the light and allowed me to return to this world again. It must be because I'm not pious enough." Mr. Besson's fanatical look made his old friend frown. Most of the people here came here half-heartedly. On the one hand, they did witness a miracle, so they had a huge impact on the concept of the world. But on the other hand, they also wanted to see what would happen next. What if it was a mistake? What if it was true? What was the difference between a person and a salted fish? At this time, Mr. Besson suddenly raised the three-pronged candlestick in his hand and completely transformed into a middle-aged Chinibu. He let out a strange, hysterical roar. "Ah, ah." Everyone shook their heads, including Mr. Besson's young wife. She couldn't help frowning. She felt that the messenger of God Baki had deceived her. Didn't Mr. Besson make a will? But all of a sudden, a strong gust of wind blew through the originally calm hall, extinguishing the flames of all the candles and plunging everything into darkness. At the moment when the strange thing happened, everyone couldn't even react. But after a few seconds, the extinguished candles automatically lit up again. What happened? A frightened voice sounded. At this moment, Mr. Besson suddenly exclaimed in surprise and excitement. His whole body was trembling as he raised his head and knelt on the ground as if he was possessed by a demon. "Are you calling for me?" Above Mr. Besson's head, the messenger of God was suspended in the air. Everyone saw the messenger of God wearing a carnival mask that day. It really appeared. Oh my God, did he lose his wire? Mr. Besson suddenly stood up and shouted angrily, "Ignorant sinner! Hurry up and apologize in front of the messenger of God. Do you want to be punished by the all-knowing and all-powerful God?" Perhaps it was because of Mr. Baysong's solemn expression that scared the crowd, or perhaps it was because this oracle had already performed miracles that were beyond scientific explanation, or perhaps it was because they were wearing a black robe and participating in this secret ceremony, so they were subconsciously afraid. Under the gaze of the floating oracle, they knelt down timidly. At this time, the messenger of God suddenly looked at Mr. Besson. Buggy was indeed looking at Mr. Besson at this moment. Some conversations from more than 10 minutes ago still appeared clearly in Bucky's mind. The conversation between him and Miss Maid. What? Ceremony? It's just a fantasy of a group of rich people. They have great material wealth, but they are very poor in spirit. You're lucky to encounter Mr. Besson's dying. People tend to be in awe of mystery at the moment of death. Then what should I do? You don't even have to do anything. Just keep your image. Leave the rest to Mr. Besson, because he has already recognized the existence of the so-called all-knowing and all-powerful God. He will automatically fill in a lot of things for you. Even if you casually say a word, he may interpret it for a long time and regard it as an oracle. As long as you use Mr. Besson well, you can quickly grow your church. So, it seems to be true. When Buggy looked at Mr. Besson again, he was very happy. Mr. Besson was rich, very rich, and he was a Chinibu. His friends were all rich, and it was said that Chinibu was contagious. The key was that these people were very rich, and the people they contacted were all very rich. The people who joined the church in the future would be very rich. Rich, rich, rich. Why should I be a gangster? This way I can earn money quickly. MMP, I made a comeback. Mr. Besson, I have felt your piety. With Miss Maid supporting him with the power of levitation. Even if Buggy's spiritual power had just started and the blessing ring could only be used 3 or 4 times a day, he was not afraid at all. From today onwards, you are. Buggy dragged out his voice. Mr. Besson's throat moved, and he stared nervously at the messenger of God above his head. Finally, Buggy said slowly, "My servant." Servant? Mr. Besson was stunned. Buggy said calmly, "In the holy kingdom of my God, everyone is a servant of my God. I am the incarnation of God in the human world. As my servant, you are also a servant of God. As long as you are pious, you will be able to promote the kingdom of God in the future." With that, the emerald mitre was activated, and a scene of bliss suddenly appeared on the ceiling. Miss Maid said that this thing could eventually form such a space, but he needed to collect enough power of faith as support. In addition, according to the agreement signed with the club, Buggy only had the right to use this thing for 10 years. Once the 10 years were up, he needed to use it. Kingdom of God. Exclamations were heard, and Buggy waved his hands. He could not support such a scene of the kingdom of God for long. At this moment, if it were not for the support of Miss Maid's levitation, he would have been tired to the ground. You, as Besson's servants, as long as you are pious enough, you can also become God's servants in the future. Buggy slowly landed and said calmly, "Besson, come and kiss my feet." Mr. Besson lowered his head and kissed Buggy's shoes without saying a word. Buggy placed his hand on Mr. Besson's forehead. His palm glowed faintly. Mr. Besson seemed to be enjoying it. When he stood up, his face was ruddy and full of energy. It was as if he had suddenly become a few years younger. Oracle, everyone hesitated. Buggy said calmly, "Besson, prepare a place for me to rest. Tomorrow, I will choose 3 of your servants to bless and let them feel the grace of God." Besson was overjoyed and quickly arranged a place for them to stay. After that, Mr. Besson, who had been promoted to Oracle's servant, looked at everyone present. "Everyone, I feel better than ever. My body seems to have endless power." With that said, Mr. Besson suddenly held a tea table in the hall with both hands. The tea table was carved with marble, and it was very luxurious and heavy. Mr. Besson lifted it easily and then threw it away. Boom! The heavy sound of the collision shook the entire villa. "So, everyone, why don't you hurry up and kiss my feet and become my servants?" The sound was continuous and very neat. When Caroline woke up, there was a movie projector in front of her. The film flashed in front of Caroline's eyes under the high-speed rotation. She looked around doubtfully and found herself in a narrow room. She wasn't the only one. In front of her, she could see a back figure. It should be a man. Recalling the scene before she fell into a coma, Caroline became nervous subconsciously. The mysterious guy who took her away was looking at the movie on the screen in front of him. He seemed to be in a daze. Caroline subconsciously moved her body. She was not tied up by this mysterious man, but just placed on the ground casually. Because of the movement, Caroline accidentally touched the cabinet next to her. The mysterious man should have noticed it, and he tilted his head slightly. Under the strong light of the projector, Caroline couldn't see the man's appearance, but she heard the other party's hoarse voice. "You're awake? You. Who are you?" Caroline looked around and asked nervously, "Where is this place? Why did you take me here?" The man continued to look at the movie in front of him and said slowly, "This was originally an auditorium, and then it became a venue for a film and drama club. As for who I am the person who originally sat in dormitory 403. Dormitory 403. Caroline frowned. She felt that this number was unusually familiar. Suddenly, Caroline remembered where dormitory 403 was. That was the place where she had been living for the past 2 days. You are Arnold's classmate? Caroline was surprised. Ever since she moved into that dormitory 2 days ago, she had never seen that classmate of Arnold's at all. But why did this person also appear quietly at night? How much do you know about Arnold? The mysterious man tilted his head slightly again and asked. Caroline stood up, then reached out and quietly picked up the plate with a roll of movie film on the table. She looked at the place warily. If it weren't for me, you would have been discovered by Boston's people, because you don't know that they still have people outside to help you. If you just leave like this, I'm afraid you're in danger now. Even so, do you still want to attack me? Caroline took 2 steps back. But why did you help me? Why? The man slowly stood up and turned to face Caroline. At this time, Caroline saw the man's appearance clearly. Or rather, she was so frightened by this appearance that the film plate in her hand fell to the ground. His head was wrapped in many bandages, and some of his exposed skin was dry and wrinkled as if he had experienced a very serious burn. His voice was even more hoarse and deep, like the roar of the devil, which made Caroline's scalp tingle. "Because you and I have a common enemy." The man pointed to his face. "The reason why I became like this is because of those 2 brothers.